Welcome, everyone, to the Mind Hiking Podcast. I'm your host, Brody Frye, and there is so much to be said about life, love, and the work we're all doing here. This is a conversation of vast reaches and incredible depths. The only words you could use to explain the power and strength of this conversation is the words themselves. All I ask is that you keep an open mind and listen. And it just might leave an impact on you, just as it did with me. I want to leave you with a quote. The one who gets wisdom loves life. The one who cherishes understanding will soon prosper. That's Proverbs 19:8, New International Version. With that said, stay tuned. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Brody Frye, and here we dive deep into difficult questions. We'll map out thoughts, theories, and crazy ideas for the love of knowledge and growth. So, how do we answer some of the mind's toughest questions? This is the Mind Hiking Podcast. Mark Covalt, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. It's an honor. I want to start off by saying thank you so much for your time. I know you're a busy man, so this is not easy to find the time, but I appreciate you spending it here with me today.
No problem.
Yeah. I'll give you a quick little introduction. You are the owner and operator of the Fox Valley APA, that is correct?
Yes.
Okay. For the listeners that don't know what the APA is or what that position is, could you give me a quick, brief rundown of what that is?
Sure. So the APA is the American Pool Players Association, and so we own the franchise of that, which is Fox Valley APA. So, and it's basically we run a particular territory, a geographic region across the United States. So it's mapped by region. And so we control and run all of McHenry County and northern King County, everything north of 90. So that's our territory. So we're able to build teams and run divisions of pool players and teams anywhere in that region.
Okay.
If I go outside of that, that could be other people's regions.
Okay.
So yes.
Gotcha. So is it almost like a franchise, kind of like it's broken down
Yeah, it is. Excuse me.
No problem.
It is a franchise, and the regions were broken up many, 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 many years ago.
Okay.
And so I could expand. For example, I could go to corporate and say, "Hey, look, I'd like to expand in this area here."
Sure, yeah.
And so we would negotiate what would it cost to take over that region, right? So if it's not a region that's already controlled by another league operator. So I would be a league operator. So if I wanted to expand out to, let's say, Boone County that doesn't have anybody there, then basically it would be based on the population size, and then so we would negotiate what that would look like.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sounds cool. How long ago was the APA established?
Oh, it's been around for a long time.
Okay.
1979.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I didn't realize.
Yeah, 1979 when Terry Bell and I keep forgetting the other guy, and I hate myself for always, but one of his good friends. They were both professional pool players back in the 70s, and they had the idea and the vision that they looked around and they said, there's not a lot of opportunity for amateur pool players to play other than back in those days. It's like hustling, you're in the pool hall and you're there either making money or you're just, or that you have bar leagues and things like that. But there was nothing that was organized that would give people across the United States. So that's when Terry Bell and again, I'm going to apologize in advance for not remembering the other co-founder, but they got together and decided to create this thing that wasn't the APA. It wasn't the American Pool Players Association till later. It
Okay.
used to be the Bush League. It used to be under many
Okay.
different names.
Yeah.
The Bush League, Camel League, and then they basically put it all together
merged.
and said, okay, we're going to have this national identity called the American Pool Players
okay.
Association.
Got
So
it.
yeah.
So basically a lot of groups just kind of merged together, same idea. And
Yeah, it was yes, it was all the same idea. Like when I joined many in 1996, when I first joined as a
Okay.
player back down in Cape Girardeau, Missouri.
Okay.
It was
Oh, wow.
it was the Bush League, right?
Got it.
And then I had stopped playing, and then years later in 2014, when I decided to start playing again, it was the APA, and I didn't realize that they were the same thing until later.
Okay. Yeah, that is so cool.
Because down at the bottom of the new player applications, it used to say, I think it still does, it says, like, have you ever been a part of the Bush League, Camel League? And it has a string of all these.
Got it.
So, because if you have been, then we probably have your information already.
Okay. Wow, that is so cool. Are any of those groups still like independently active, or it's all under?
It's
APA?
all under the
Okay.
APA now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any? I'm sure there's other like leagues that operate similarly. Is there? Or
No,
is it
there are
That's
there
what's unique
are
about it?
many leagues out there that try to duplicate what the APA has done.
okay.
And there's a lot of competing leagues, and I'm all for competition. I
Yeah.
love competition between businesses because that's capitalism, right?
Yep.
And competition always breeds success.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are many other competing leagues out there, and
Okay.
more than I even know about. But but a lot of them try to copy what the APA has done over 42 years.
Right. Yeah.
And the thing is I've heard it said that the best flattery is emulation. So
Okay, yeah,
so
yeah.
I like that. And the fact is that the APA is the largest amateur league in the world. I mean, we operate not only in the United States now, but Canada, Singapore,
Wow.
and also where else? There's one other place that we are opened up in Japan. Japan.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we have the APA, the CPA, which is Canada, and the JPA, which is Japan, and then now we actually have a league operator in Singapore now.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's so
it's
cool.
awesome. It
yeah.
is.
That's really,
We
really
are
cool.
truly international, and so
Yeah.
when we have our World Pool Championships
Mm-hmm.
every year, it is literally people and players and teams coming from literally all
around
of those.
the world.
Yes.
That's amazing. Wow. So cool. So I did hear you say how you played pool and then you took a little bit of a break there and then you got back in.
Yes.
What got you in? Was it like your father that played pool? Like how'd you initially start and then how come you took a break?
Well, okay, so I am I'm very competitive. Growing up in my family with two other brothers,
Okay, yeah.
we're very competitive academically, athletically, and so my mindset has always been if I'm going to take up something,
Yeah.
I want to be good at it. I want to be the best at it.
Yep.
So pool was one of those sports that I really loved the challenge of putting your skills to the test. Now, like when I
Yeah.
started, like everybody else, I was horrible. I was horrible.
Yeah.
I would think I was aiming in the right place, and I'd hit the ball, and it wouldn't even go anywhere close to where I would think it would go. Right in my head, it looked better.
Yeah.
But when I'd get down and I'd shoot the ball, and
Yeah.
it would go off like I'd miss it by a diamond, and I'd be
Yeah.
like, it'd scratch my head. It's like, why didn't it work?
Yeah, yeah.
So, but here's so I was 15 when my dad bought us our first pool cue. We were doing that, and my dad was a good pool player. I mean, he played in bar leagues, but he was good. He had his own cue, but back then it was a 3-piece
Oh, really?
cue that he would have in a hard plastic case.
Yeah.
And we would be playing, and then he'd take his out, and he'd just clean the floor with us. And
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, wow. But so we played, and then when I went off to college, I went to U of I, and probably the first couple of weeks there, I found the union, and in the union at U of I in Urbana-Champaign, they had like 23 9-foot tables,
Oh,
Brunswick
wow.
crowns. They had a snooker table, which I'd never seen a snooker table before. They had a 3-cushion billiards table, which I had never seen
Wow,
before, other
yeah.
than well, no, I had never seen it at that point. And so I remember the first time that when I got the bug of wanting to really get good at
Yeah,
pool was
yeah.
when I walked in there and I watched these guys, and there were other college students, and it was like the first or second week of classes, and I'm in there for lunch, and I'm sitting down, and I'm watching these guys play, and they were playing for money. I noticed right away they were playing for money,
Yeah.
and I watched this guy. I'll never forget. His name was Steve Moy,
Okay.
and I watched him run. I didn't know it was who he was at the time, but
Mm.
I watched him run 3 racks of 9 ball in a row,
Wow.
and I never seen that. Now
Wow,
watching him,
yeah.
it was like a ballerina around the table.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
watching him, I mean, everything looked so easy,
That's
and I'm
amazing.
like, so what I did was I said, that's it. I want to get better. So I went up to the second floor of the Union where they had a bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
And in there, I found 3 books by a guy, one of the most prolific writers in billiards, which is Robert Burns.
Okay.
And so I didn't know who he was. I just saw 3, I just looked at billiards.
Yeah.
And there was the Standard Book of Pool, Advanced Book of Pool, and his Treasury of Trick Shots, which I still own to this day.
Wow, yeah.
And so what I did was I started taking it seriously. And I said, okay, so I read every single book from cover to cover. And what I would do is back then they had diagrams, so everything was
Okay.
drawn.
Yeah, that's nice.
And so he had diagrams of all of these shots with
Oh,
the
wow.
English. He would have the ball with the right English. And so
Yeah.
I spent my time at the Union practicing all of those shots. I would set them
Wow.
up on the pool table and just
Yeah.
practice them. And of course, I played other people, and of course, played for money because that was the thing, you know.
Yep.
and so I got better. Okay.
Yeah.
And in fact, at one point while I was there, I was only at U of I for 3 semesters. That's another story, which I'll allude to in a second. But
Okay.
one of the girls that played there, she was a collegiate champion of
Okay.
8-ball.
Yeah.
Okay, so she actually kind of took me under her wing and showed me some drills and looked at my stroke mechanics and
Yeah.
things like that. And so the long story short is that I ended up spending more time at the pool hall than in class.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so which was good and bad. And then so I ended up leaving. So I still played pool. I left the university after 3 semesters. I just didn't want to be there for other reasons
Okay.
that we might get into later. But
Sure.
from there I just kept excelling, wanted to play, and then I went back up home up north around here, and I continued to play as I was, doing other things, working, building. I got into other businesses that I was working at, sales. I got into sales, but I
Okay.
always had pool. So I was always
Yeah.
out playing pool all the time.
Yeah.
I was playing pool every night if I could.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I got an opportunity to move down to Cape Girardeau, Missouri.
Okay.
And I had gotten an opportunity to become a branch manager for the company that I was working with. I sold vacuum cleaners, Electrolux
Okay.
vacuum cleaners and shampoos.
Yeah.
And I had went down to Cape Girardeau to take over a branch that was struggling. And so when I took it over, first thing I did was find the pool hall.
Yep.
And so I found this one pool hall in Cape Girardeau. It was right on the river, the Mississippi River. And it was had a bunch of pool tables in there, and I figured, and they had tournaments,
Yeah.
these cash tournaments. So I decided one day I'll go in there and just see how I do.
Sure, yeah.
And I played in the tournament, and I was an outsider. Nobody knew me. And I remember Loy Ha, who's the owner at the time, and I believe he still is the owner. I'm not 100% sure, but Loy Ha, who was running the tournament, I went up to him and said, I'm so-and-so, and I'd like to play in your tournament. And he says, well, what's your skill level? And I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And so they had an A, B, C, D rating.
Okay.
then. So he said, okay,
Interesting.
well, he played me a couple of racks,
Yeah.
and he said, okay, I'll put you at a I can't remember, a B or a C.
Okay, yeah.
And there was so I played in the tournament. It got down to me and one guy for the finals.
Oh, wow.
And there were so many people that were complaining about my handicap. They were like, "There's no way this guy's a B or whatever."
Yeah,
and again, I don't know what they're saying. I have no. All I'm doing is playing my game. But I
Right.
made this one shot, and I was so proud of myself because it was a shot that I had practiced before that had come up in a diagram.
Okay.
And of course, I played it perfectly, and the guy that was playing just got angry because it's like, "There's no way he
Yeah.
can." And I'm not going
Yeah.
to explain the shot because I couldn't do it justice.
Yeah.
But in the end, I was like, that's how I got introduced to the
Yeah.
inner circle or whatever for people there. And then
awesome.
I start to meet other people who played pool, and so I
Okay.
got involved in
So
tournaments.
you impressed them all. And
Right.
Could you try to explain the shot quickly?
Well, it was a frozen ball shot, but I was
Okay.
also it was like I was frozen to the rail and frozen to another ball.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
Which
there
for
was
the listener, sorry, that's just making contact.
sure, yes, they were connected. So the two balls, the ball that I needed to hit was frozen to the cue ball, and both balls were frozen to the end rail. And I had another ball that was literally like a half an inch or even more, like in front of my ball. So
Wow.
it was a very what we call a double hit. You have to
Okay.
avoid a double hit where the cue will hit the cue ball twice, which is a foul. So in order to avoid it, I had to actually shoot into the rail
Okay.
to get my angle. So which is you can't. I couldn't shoot into the ball because it was going to cause a problem.
Okay.
But so in this case, I had to actually shoot into the rail.
Got it.
Which is not something you would normally see to do.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and it worked out perfectly. I was able to not only make my ball, but I was able to avoid hitting the other ball that was close to it. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Wow. And it's so convenient that was one that you practiced for so long. Wow, it's so cool.
So there are
you-
certain things that come up
Yeah.
often enough that you probably want to practice.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
But to fast forward, it got to a point where I was when I started in the APA or the Bush League. Then I was at a 5. I started as a 3, and I got up to a 5, and I plateaued. I just for the life of me, I could not break. I couldn't get any better. And long story short, I got really frustrated with my game. And at one point, it's like I realized, I was one of those guys that would get so angry. I would slam balls. I would throw the rack. And it got to the point where I was like 23. I was 23, and I said to myself, "Why? If I'm not having fun, why am I playing?"
Yeah.
So I stopped playing.
Yeah.
I stopped playing. I just said, and that was in 90. That was in 97.
Okay. That was the year I was
Yeah.
born. I have a similar feeling with I don't know if are you a golfer?
I've played once.
Okay.
It's something I'd like to pick up, but I just don't have time.
I love it. Similar reason as pool, where it like you got to think the shots out and you got to think ahead. It's about placement and it's like a one person game. It's a mental game. I just love that kind of stuff. And same thing. Like I got pretty good and then I kind of stalled out at a certain handicap and I played competitively in high school, played some tournaments and was pretty good. But similar thing. I plateaued and it got to the point where it was hard to enjoy because I was at the skill level where like I knew better than some of the things that I was doing, and it just got frustrating more than enjoyable for me. And I was same thing like after school every single day I was out playing and then like you were saying with the shot making, like there's certain shots that come up so often where it's probably a good thing to know those shots where like chip shots over bunkers, like that stuff's going to happen. And you want to practice the worst case scenario shots because those can turn into like blow up holes. But if you know how to perform the shot that could turn it into a blow up hole, then you can save yourself a little bit there. So
right.
similar thing.
Yeah. No, it's that's why I practice all the illustrations in the books because he would put those illustrations in there because those were the shots that typically come up.
Got it. Yeah.
So what happened was I stopped playing pool, and also at the same time, I had gotten into financial services. I was building that business in there, and so I decided I needed to focus on. I need to grow up.
Yeah,
Is basically what happened. Is I just said I need to grow up.
Okay.
And so I've got more important things that I need to do. And so I did that, and so I put my cue up for in fact, it was after I moved up from Cape Girardeau back to McHenry, Illinois.
Okay. Yeah.
And I actually also had gotten married in 2001. So in that time period, that's another reason why I put my cue up, is because
Yeah,
I was,
yeah.
I got married, had 3 kids right away, stepkids.
Yeah.
And I just needed to put, so I put it up on my bookshelf, and
Yeah.
that's where it stayed for, I
Yeah.
think, almost 18 years. I didn't play pool at all.
Yeah. Did you ever have just itches to get back at it?
I didn't. There were moments, there were times where I would reminisce about the days of playing pool,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I pushed it out of my head because I was just too busy, and
Yeah.
it wasn't an important thing in my life. It was something I enjoyed, but it kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't until 2014 we had met. It was kind of after Mass, we had serendipitously had met a couple of parishioners there that we just happened to talk to after
Yeah.
Mass, and we became good, friends right off the bat. So we started hanging out, and we'd have dinner over at their house. They'd come over to our house, and they had a pool table in their basement. So one day we were in the basement playing pool, and Steve and Marky Works was their name. So
Okay.
Steve and I were playing pool and with Marky, and Marky's like, Mark, you're really good. You should play.
Yeah.
Because they were playing in a bar league at the time,
Okay.
and here's the thing, I had forgotten how much I loved the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah. You got to
'Cause
taste again.
I was like, and then I'm like, you know what? And Joy and I were like at a point where it's like, yeah, why don't we? So we started
Yeah.
joining on their league, and
Yeah.
I loved it. And
awesome.
in fact, we got to the point where we were playing this one team, and it came down to me and this other guy,
Yeah.
and it was a one rack where you just basically a round robin, and you play one rack.
Okay.
And this one guy who was the best player on the team, he was like in the bar league. He was
Yeah.
he was really good.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, he could run the table.
Wow.
And I remember he broke, and I think he made a ball or snook it himself, but I ended up running the table on him. And everybody's
Oh,
like
wow.
on their feet,
Yeah.
as I'm running the table, I'm done, and I'm like shaking.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then that's when I decided. That's when I found out about the APA, because I started
Yeah.
looking online, and I found
Okay.
the APA, and I joined the APA under Nick Diaz, and
Okay.
Marky and Steve joined with us, and the rest was history. And
Wow, that's
I
so
started, and I was still a 5, but here's the thing that happened with me. I made a promise to myself that if I was going to play pool again in a competitive nature, that I was not going to let my temper and my emotions get the best of me, because I was not going to become that person again.
Yeah.
I did not like that person. So I made it a point that I would always tell myself, okay, regardless of how I play, I am not going to show any emotion.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a good sport. I'm going to shake their hand. And so I would play this in my head. I had to have to tell myself
Yeah.
this over and over again. And if I miss a shot, in my head, I'm just like, oh, well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I got into this routine in my head that I would just, and it helped. And in fact, the best compliment, I was playing another player, a really good player, Ron Carta, and we were playing at this place with 9-foot tables. And so I knew it was going to be a challenging match. So in my head, I would prepare myself mentally saying, okay, this is going to be a tough match, win or lose, just give it to your best. And so I was playing him, and he started missing shots. I just, kept playing, and I was playing well. And I ended up losing. But this gentleman that was sitting at the bar, I guess watching us, came over afterwards, and he gave me the best compliment. He came up to me and he said, I've been watching you play, and I said, I have to say, you play with class. I says, you're a great sport, and you're a really good shot. And I said, I enjoyed watching you play. And I was like, that would meant it all.
Wow, yeah.
Losing the match, that was the best compliment because that told me that
Yeah.
I was doing what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Is I was being the person I wanted to be.
Right, yeah.
Now, have
That's
I always lived
amazing.
up to
Yeah.
that? No, I've still, and Joy will tell you that there
Yeah.
were times, even in the pool leagues, where I did start to let my temper get the best of me.
Sure, yeah.
And she lets me know.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I don't want like it to feel like we glossed over that quickly too, because that is a very challenging thing. Where I'm going to compare it to golf again, where like I'm super competitive also. My father's super competitive too, and I kind of got it from him. And I was playing before I played competitively in high school, and I had a temper with golf too. If I like, because I would, fortunately enough, I grew up on a farm and I had space to practice hitting golf balls and stuff, which was very nice. And so I'd practice shots all the time. And then when I'm out and playing in a round, like, and then I know a shot that I've practiced thousands of times, and then all of a sudden I mess it up. Like, it's very frustrating. And I was really young, and I would get frustrated and slam clubs into the ground and things like that. And then when I started competing in high school, and it wasn't just me playing a round of golf, I was representing our school. Luckily enough for me, like, my coaches never saw like my temper, but there was other examples on the team that same thing, like had a temper, and the coaches had seen some of that, and they shut that down really quick and said, no, we got to uphold these standards. You're not just playing yourself, you're representing our school. And that went into like not just playing the game, but the golf etiquette too, where we had to, every time we stepped foot on a green, we had to fix 2 ball marks before we were allowed to walk off, even if we didn't hit the green, and things like that. Just the littlest things, and just like having the respect of the course itself. And like some people would, like, because we always carried our bags. We weren't allowed to have carts when we were competing, so we'd carry them, and some kids would like set their bags down like on the green or next to the green and things like that. It was just disrespectful for the game. And like we would always just make sure we had plenty of space, and like same thing about like moving around when somebody else is taking a shot, things like that. And they really, what I appreciated about my coaches was like it wasn't just about the game, it was about the person that you are, and how you present yourself out there and uphold the standards of the school and the team. So very, very cool stuff.
I absolutely agree with that. And sports in general, it's about teaching etiquette, and it's also teaching you how to be. Good sportsmanship is about being a good person, and how to behave yourself, and that's more important.
Yeah.
And I agree with you 100%. And what I had to realize too, and again, I had to read books, and I had to, but I had a clinical psychologist, a behavioral psychologist once said, and it said this, and it rang true for me. One of the best things I heard, he said, where your frustration comes in, because I did not like the person I would be. Like, I would have these temper tantrums. It was like being a kid with a temper tantrum. I cannot explain it any other way.
Yeah.
Because that's the reality. And I hated myself afterwards, and I would apologize to the person for acting that way. But still, it's like I'm a grown man acting like a freaking 3-year-old over a game.
Yeah.
Now again, I understand, but this one sentence that this psychologist said was, it's all about unmet expectations. That I had this unrealistic expectation of how I should play all of the time.
Yeah.
And there's a great book that also said the same thing by a neuropsychologist called and he's a pool player too. So he's a neuropsychologist who loves pool and wrote a book about it.
Yeah.
And it's about the mental game of pool, called The Pleasure of Small Motions.
Okay.
I actually had a chance to talk to him for a moment, actually reached out to him.
Oh, wow.
But
I got to get that. I'll write that down.
yeah, right. It's The Pleasure of Small Motions. And
Okay.
in that book, he says the same thing. He says that you have this unrealistic expectation that because you've played at this high level before, that's where you should play all of the time. And that's just not realistic. And so
Yeah.
I had to overcome this idea in my head of being the perfect pool player. And if I play as a 7, then I
Yeah.
should always play as a 7.
Yeah.
And so it was, and that also helped me control my emotions because I realized, you know what? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
That even if I am a 7, that doesn't mean that every time I walk to the pool table, I'm going to play that way.
Right.
And so I realized that I had to tell myself that just go out there, do your best, and let the rest take care of itself. If you win or lose, just as long as you go out there and you focus on what you're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
So-
Yeah. One thing my father always used to say too that would kind of keep things into perspective is like if I start getting frustrated and we're like out playing golf and I start getting frustrated with the shot or something or I slam a club or something, he would just be like, Brody, we're playing golf. It's a beautiful day and we're not just out here, but we get to be out here playing golf. We're having fun. Like we could be in a way worse situation, but we get to be out here on a beautiful day playing a game. Let's
Yep.
have some fun.
Yep.
And that's what it's about. And that always stuck out to me.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point because in the book, The Pleasure of Small Motions, he brings that up too. It's like, why play a game? The only reason to play a game is if it's fun. If it's not fun, why would you play it?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so that rang another thing about it. It's like, yep,
Yeah.
that's right. It's like, so you always got to keep the main thing, right?
Yep. Yeah. Right.
So no, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever played chess before?
Yes.
Okay.
I grew up playing chess. I
Oh,
was part of
wow.
a chess club. I had a friend that was very good, and he would kick my butt all the time. Another game that I would get frustrated with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love chess. I don't get to play as much as I used to. I play once in a while.
Yeah.
But 8-ball is like chess to me.
Yeah, you're right. I feel like all these games, like I like to lump golf in there just because I have more experience with that. But like all these games, like I just recently discovered chess. Like I started playing chess like a month ago. I like for the first time ever. And
Awesome.
one of my friends introduced me, and he's like, "How haven't you played this before? Like you play all these other things." And I'm like, I don't know. Like I've played checkers before, but like for me, it was like so many pieces. It was just like too complicated for me to even like bother with it. And then like, cause I knew once I started, like I would be obsessed with it and
Right.
put it
Right.
off for so long. And then I finally learned the game and I'm like, I really enjoy it. It's like, this is fun.
Yes, it is a fun game, and that's another game that also like with 8-ball or 9-ball does with pool is thinking ahead, thinking moves
Yeah.
ahead. Like
Yeah.
in chess, the idea is you want to be thinking 4 moves ahead. In pool, it's the same thing. You want to be thinking 4 shots ahead. Like for example, and again, the more you practice this, but if you want to already know what side, what angle you need on the 4th ball ahead, and so you have to mentally think, okay, I need to be on this side of the shooting line for this
Yeah.
ball to get to this side of the shooting line for this ball. So you're honestly thinking 4 balls ahead.
Yeah.
And chess is the same way. If you can get to the point where you're thinking 4 moves ahead in chess, same thing.
Yeah.
So that's why I like it, I liken the two together.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's, I love that. I love the mental aspect of these games is what's so enjoyable to me. Cause like a lot of time, cause I kind of made a what seems to be like a crazy transition. Cause I grew up, I was 3 years old and thrown on a motorcycle. I was racing dirt bikes from 3 years old to, I was 13. Unfortunately, I had 2 of my close friends get in an accident, and actually they were killed on motorcycles.
Sorry to hear that.
Thanks, yeah. And at that time, I remember specifically, I was 13 years old, and I remember my dad was standing at me right before a dirt bike race, and right next to me, and I looked at him, and I was like, Dad, I don't want to do this anymore. And he's like, I'm fine with that. Like, I get it. But where I was going with that was going from dirt bikes, then we went to golf, and then all these other mental games. Some of my friends, some of my dirt bike friends will be like, how did you go from racing motocross to playing golf? Like, that seems like such a huge, drastic swing. I guess the tie-in would be that my grandfather always played golf, and he was very good. He actually holds a record at Crystal Lake Country Club, and for the lowest amount of putts in a round.
Nice.
But he was very good, and I'd never swung a golf club until after I stopped playing or racing dirt bikes. And for me, like mentally, the transition wasn't that different because like racing motocross, what people don't understand is there's a mental aspect to that too, where you're looking far out ahead of you and you're dealing with like moving variables. Like it's not just like you racing a dirt bike. Like there's other people on the track with you racing alongside you, and all like the terrain is always changing, and you're picking lines in front of you, and you got to pick the right lines, and when you come back around the next lap, everybody also went over that part, and the track changes, and you got to pick the best line, like the line choice, and not just choosing the line. You don't have time to sit and think for a while. This is like split second decision making, and these other games are not so fast paced, but the mental aspect of it, I love it's like the puzzles, like the problem solving behind these games. So, and it just like I feel like I have a busy, active mind, and going from motocross to golf wasn't that big of a transition for me. Like it transitioned over nicely is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
and then same with pool. My father, he played pool, for years. Similar thing where he took a long break after I was born, and then, motocross, and then he got back into pool recently, and he's very good, and he introduced me into pool, and it was kind of cool where he had a little hobby where he was. Have you ever seen like the TV show Storage Wars, where they like buy and sell
Yes,
storage units?
yes.
He did that for a little bit actually, and we got
Nice.
a pool table out of one of those. Everybody thought it was a like a bed frame, or like for a water bed, a bed frame, and he got it for $50 this unit, because it was like just that in there, but it was a pool table. It was a 8-foot pool table.
Oh, that's nice.
And
Yeah.
an American Heritage one.
Oh,
And,
American Heritage,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, with the red felt. It was beautiful table, and so we got that, set it up, and it was a 3-piece slate and beautiful
Okay,
table,
okay.
and practice on that all the time, and I loved it. It was like when I was like 18 years old, it was just like pool and golf is like everything that I was doing like every day, and I loved that, and I was probably a better pool player back when I was like 18, 19 years old than I am now, because I played all the time, and then life happens and you get busy, but
True.
But the games like that are amazing. I love it. And for pool, like 8-ball and 9-ball are the only like games that I know. I think isn't there like a 10-ball? Is that
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Now they have 10 ball.
Okay.
Which is just rotation with 10 balls instead of 9
Okay.
balls.
Okay.
There are rule differences, like you have to call shots in 10 ball that you
Okay.
don't call in 9 ball, but it's relatively similar, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So back in the day, they just called it rotation.
Okay.
So
Gotcha. So in the APA, they only have 8-ball and 9-ball, right?
yeah, we're just 8-ball
Okay.
and 8-ball and 9-ball. We don't have anything other than that.
Okay. Do you have a preference?
I like 9-ball.
Okay.
It goes fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also like 8-ball because of the thinking part. It's like one, you have more options. So if you get
Yep.
into trouble with one shot, you have others to pick from. But it's also more like chess, because I tend to be more of an aggressive player. If I can try to run the table, I'll run the table. It wasn't until I joined the APA again, recently in 2014, and I really started taking I wanted to take my game to another level, that I started really having to consider defense,
Okay.
because I was not running the table, and or if I did run the table and I'd miss like the ball before the 8-ball,
Yeah.
and I was playing a good shot, they would just run the table, and all I was doing was moving obstacles out of their way.
Got it. Yeah.
And they would beat me every single time. I just couldn't get it to where I'd run the table.
Yeah.
And so then I had to, again, through reading books and studying the game, I had
Yeah.
to consider defense, and there was a great I don't know, I don't remember who said it, but he said, offense will win games, but defense will win tournaments.
Okay.
And so I
Yeah.
started implementing defense into my gameplay as
Yeah.
part of my strategy. And so I started doing that because the idea was if I can snooker my opponent and get ball in hand,
Yeah.
it opens a whole
Yeah.
option. So I started rethinking that if I got down to a ball and I was not 100% sure, but then I saw an opportunity to play a safety
Yeah.
to try to get ball in hand, I would do that. And I
Yeah.
started winning more matches and I started doing better.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like that is a humbling strategy to learn because similar thing with me where I remember I played on the 9 ball league and I actually prefer 8 ball. My dad had an opening on his team for 9 ball, so I played 9 ball with him. But I they're both fun. I prefer 8 ball, same thing. I like having the options a little bit more to work with. And like the feeling of being stuck, and because I had that feeling a lot of times in 9 ball. So, but the I like having the options, but I just drew a blank on where I was going with that. I can't remember where we were going. Something along the lines of. Oh, what were we just talking about? I'm sorry. It's like
Oh,
just
the preference between 8 ball and 9 ball,
Yeah.
and the idea of defense.
defense. That's where it was. Thank you. Yeah, it was like humbling for me where similar thing where I wanted to like run the table or like make the shots I wanted to make, and I felt like it was a loss almost when like you play a defensive shot, and I'm like I don't want to. Like I felt like I was wasting a shot playing a defensive shot. My dad just kept telling me like, "No, safety, safety, safety," and I'm just like, I don't want to waste a shot. And like it, yeah, it was like,
Yep. No, I'm in the same boat because I'm a
Yeah.
very aggressive player,
Yeah,
right? So you're
yeah.
you're probably the same way. It's like, man, if I have a shot that I could, make the shot and run the table, I'm
Yeah.
gonna go for the run.
Yeah.
And so safeties was like, that's for other people.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
but the more I got my butt kicked, the more I would lose.
Mm-hmm.
The more, and I have to give credit where credit is due.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Kenny, when I started playing, he is a great player. And
Mm-hmm.
when I started playing, I didn't know who he was, but I was again, I was a 5. He was a 7.
Okay, yeah.
7, 8. I think
Oh,
he was
wow.
at the time.
Yeah.
And so a really good shot. I would watch him play, and he's very quiet. And so, but I would watch him run the table, and so the first time I played him, I was a 5, and I was nervous because he's such a good player, and
Yeah.
and he beat me. He beat me terribly. I think he beat me. He beat me 5-0.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow, yeah.
And so that was a bruised my ego, and I wasn't happy about that, but I was like, man. And then, and so I started wanting to get better. And so I ended up searching online for anything that I could get for training.
Yeah.
And I came across this guy who had just started recently his YouTube video, and it was a guy by the name of Tor Lowry, and he had this like reality show
Okay.
called the what was it called? It was called it was the 14-day challenge, pool challenge or something like that, where he would choose not random, but he would choose people to work with. So he would work with them for 2 weeks.
Okay,
And
yeah.
he would take their game from where it was and get it to the point where they were running racks.
Wow.
And so I was watching his videos. I immediately loved his
Yeah.
videos.
Wow.
And it was called 0x Billiards. So I ordered his programs, all digital downloads, but I also sent in an application.
Okay,
And
yeah.
so, and the cool thing is I've gotten to know him a little bit. So I
Wow.
actually have my phone, but I actually was entered to try to get in there. And we were actually in a conversation because he was actually going to come out. And so our schedules
Wow.
didn't meet, but he was in Moline one weekend. So we were going to meet
Okay.
up. But the thing is that, I watched his videos, and so we ended up buying a pool table. I bought a 9-foot pool table, put it into our man cave. We
Yeah.
had a man cave, a detached garage that I had remodeled into a complete separate building that had a pool table and everything. It had everything.
It's awesome.
And so what I did was I started practicing his drills. And so here's the thing, and I won't take up too much time with this, but I wanted to be better than a 5. I remember I was still at my plateau. I could not even, even after 18 years, I started as a 5, and I wanted to get better, but I just couldn't get over the hump. So I decided to go that route.
Yeah.
And so what I did was he had a video where he said, okay, if stroke mechanics. So I basically said, okay, I'm going to start from the very beginning. I'm going to redo and rebuild my game from the fundamentals up. And one of the fundamentals is your stroke mechanics, the way you stand, the way you approach a shot. So one of the stroke drills that he has is where you basically place the cue ball and the object ball within like 6 inches. And you basically shoot the object ball down into the corner pocket and basically with pocket speed, right?
Okay.
And the key is you get down, you check your stance, you check your arm, you check everything, and then what you do is you stroke through the ball and you stay down until the ball drops into the pocket.
Okay.
And he says, okay, if you really want to change your game, he says you have to stop playing pool with your friends, you got to stop playing in tournaments, and do this stroke drill and do nothing else but this stroke drill until you shoot in 3,000 to 4,000 balls.
Wow.
So I did. So at that time, I was not working. I was in between jobs. And so we had the table. And so for 6 to 8 hours a day, I would sit there and shoot one ball after another. And it took me 2 weeks.
Wow. Yeah.
To get to 4,000 balls. And that transformed my game, just that one drill. And so I had video cameras. I had, so I was videotaping myself. I was making sure I take this down to, I take it real serious.
Yeah.
And the thing is that then I started doing his pocket drills, and I started doing his position drills. And so literally my game from all that practice at that time, went from I went from a 5 to a 7.
Wow.
In about, I'd say about 2 months or less.
Wow. Okay.
And the cool thing is now I went back, and so again, let's go back to Dan Kenny.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing. Before I tell you the story, Dan Kenny was the guy that I wanted to beat.
Yeah.
Because he is so good.
Yeah.
It's like, man, if I could beat him.
Yeah.
It's like
says something.
that was my goal.
Yeah.
So every time I'd play him, that was my goal. And he's such a good sport. I mean, that's one of the things I love about him is he's very reserved. He doesn't really show his emotions.
Okay. Yeah.
And he plays his game. And so this one match, my position, it was on.
Yeah.
And so I ended up beating him. And he came up and congratulated me. But I made some really good position shots where there was a window where I had a side pocket shot.
Yeah.
And it was a 9-ball. And to get on the next ball, I think it was the 1 ball, and I had to get on the 2. The 2 was surrounded by balls. And I had a corridor of like a 2-ball window.
Wow, yeah.
And so I ended up hitting the ball and going 2 rails and floating right where it needed to be.
Wow.
And in my head, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it worked.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And I was like, and of course I'm keeping my composure okay.
Yeah.
But I ended up beating him, and I was proud of myself.
Yeah.
Because he is such a great player. He still is. I mean, but that was like when I knew.
Yeah.
Now I don't play at that level anymore because I just don't have the time. But yeah, that was when I really was into it.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So anyway,
practicing that shot so many times, that story reminded me of, I think it was like a Bruce Lee quote, but it was something along the lines of like, I'm not scared of the guy that's done 1,000 punches one time. I'm scared of the guy that's done 1 punch 1,000 times. Something along those lines.
Yes.
And that's kind of it's kind of what it reminded me of there. But yeah, it's so amazing, and especially with the cameras. You said you had those all set up.
Yep. Yep.
What was the name of, like, did he have, what was the name of the gentleman, and what was the name of the?
Tor Lowry, it's Torlowry.
Okay.
He still does. He doesn't do the 14-day challenge anymore. But because he's got his exposure has gotten to the point where, but he still does coaching, and that's actually one of the things that I would love to do with him. And we've talked on the phone. In fact, I've actually talked to him on the phone about possibly coming out, like having him come out for our, for Fox Valley APA. It's just it's we're not there yet, but that's one thing to come out and even have what I would call a clinic where he would work with people, because I believe 100%. There's a lot of coaches out there, but if you look up 0x Billiards, he is, I think, the best coach on billiards out there, because he has a background in videography, so that's what his degree is in. And so he takes his expertise in videography to pool. Because when you watch his videos, and he does such a great job of showing you all the angles. And so so he's interviewed actually Robert Burns before Robert Burns passed away. And so I liken Tor Lowry to Robert Burns because, but to a more advanced, more modern way of doing it with video. So he does all of the diagrams, and he has all the cameras in the perfect spot where you can actually see his hand position. You can see his shoulder. You can see the table outlay. And he explains everything. And he used to compete nationally too. So I think Tor Lowry, I give him kudos every time I can. I always recommend any new player, like if there are 2 or 3 and they're new and they always ask me, hey, I really want to get better, I always send them a link to 0x Billiards, because I really feel that strongly about how well he coaches and teaches. Because I could sit down and watch 3 hours of his videos on YouTube for free. He has them on, some of his videos are on YouTube for free. Where and that's where I started, was you can just sit there and watch, and you can learn something just by watching his videos.
It's amazing. And even like YouTube itself, it's amazing what you can learn from YouTube. But that's such a cool platform to be able to just like get that information like that. But that's amazing. So 0x Billiards is what somebody would look for if they wanted to look into that. Okay. That
he's also on Facebook and stuff like that. But he's a great guy. One of the most generous people I've had the opportunity to talk to. And
that's so cool. And then it was videography he had a degree in. Is that, that's awesome, because it pairs so nicely with like the modern age and like teaching like that.
I mean, it used to be, now because I don't know if he does this anymore, but it was to the point where you could actually book and you could drive out to Utah. He would, because he has this, like Diamond sponsored him, where he would do all these videos. He got so good and so popular that Diamond actually sponsored him. So he has a Diamond table in his home, and you could actually, for a time, you could drive out to his home and spend 2 or 3 days with him, and literally within 2 or 3 days, he could really help your game.
That's amazing. But you said he's not doing that anymore.
Well, he still does coaching. It's like I've looked him up, and he still does that. I just don't know if he does it in his home, or if he travels. I think he'll do both, but again, I don't quote me on that. And back to you. You have your bachelor's degree in mathematics. Is that correct? Yes, I have. I earned my bachelor's degree in pure math in 2003. No, 2008.
And
was when I earned my pure, and then I ended up going further because I couldn't find a job with that degree. So
that seems surprising, actually.
Here's the fact of the matter. If you have a bachelor's degree in math, and I don't think that this has changed, but typically, it's going to be tough finding a job unless you have a master's or higher in math. So if you want to work at places like the NSA, or if you want to work in let's say the Census Bureau, or if they're going to be hiring mathematicians, that's where they're going to be, think tanks and but you could be a teacher, but again, I didn't have my credentials to teach in Illinois. In fact, that was my starting point. My original goal was to be a high school math teacher, but then I changed my focus because that wasn't working out. So I had enough classes, so I ended up just finishing up with pure math.
Okay.
And so then after I had already been accepted to the grad program, because I had done so well as an undergraduate, at NIU, if you do well enough, which was kind of cool, but if you do well enough and you have a high enough GPA, literally your acceptance into grad school is automatic. I didn't even have to take the GRE, which is the exam that all or that undergraduates take to as an entrance exam to get into grad school. So because my GPA was so high, I didn't have to do that. So it was just filling out the application. So, but I had done that, and just as a backup, because I really didn't want to go on to get my master's. I was done after 5 years working full time and going to school full time. It was I was done. So, but then when I couldn't find a job, over the summer, and it was, I said, you know what, I'll start the grad program. And so and then I was like, okay, do I really want to do a full master's program? And then I started looking at other options, like I could do be what's called a student at large. Like you just take classes, and that could help you. And my brother was talking to me about actuarial sciences, that become an actuary, and I'm like, ooh, and the signing bonuses for actuaries like really good. And so I started looking into that, and I said, okay, well maybe I can get a second bachelor's degree in actuarial sciences. So I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And then I called the stat department, and of course I was talking to the dean of the stat division, and so telling him what my thoughts were and what I wanted to do. And he actually said, why don't you just get your master's, and if you're going to go into actuarial sciences, why don't you just get your master's in statistics? Because as more and more jobs are going to statisticians that used to only go to actuarial sciences or actuaries. And I'm like, okay. So he convinced me to go, and so I spent the next 3 years earning my master's degree in applied probability and statistics.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and that was challenging. It was a lot of fun, but it was challenging. And and then I was a statistician for about 5 years. I worked in the corporate world. I started out in market research. I did market research, and then I worked at Allstate as in part of their advanced for their quantitative analytics division. And I had a lot of fun. Fun. It was stressful. I won't lie. After 5 years being in the corporate world, I was done. I mean, I don't care to. I loved working at Allstate, for example. I loved the culture, and I loved the environment. I loved the people. It's just that I didn't like the stress of the rigor and the deadlines, and being almost felt like you have this thumb on you, even though you could come and go as you wanted and you had freedom, which was great. But at the same time, it's like I'm up at 2:00 in the morning, stressing over a hard deadline with a client that I have to get all this analytics done. And at the same time, some of this is new, so I had to read up on insurance. I didn't know a lot of insurance, so I'm reading through books. See, here's the thing that people don't understand. Is that you go and get your degree and you get this education. Doesn't mean that the first job you get, you don't have to learn anything anymore. I mean, the first thing I had to do was my boss gave me 3 books on insurance, and so guess what I was doing? Studying insurance. And so you have to know the jargon. You have to know the grammar of what you're dealing with, and so. But at the end, I realized that. I've always been entrepreneurial. I've always wanted to own my own business. And that's where I felt that I'm more comfortable at, and so and I've always been that way.
Yeah.
Even at a very young age. And so I was teaching also. I was teaching college at the same
Oh,
time.
wow.
So I was working at Allstate, and I was working at let's say used to work at the MPD group in Rosemont.
Okay. Wow.
And again, another great company with great people. And I'm still in contact with some of those people today, off and on. But the thing is that I was teaching at nights, so I'd work, and so as I was ending my career, if you will, at Allstate, and the thing, to be honest, for full transparency, my boss and I did not see eye to eye.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was in an untenable situation, in that I was doing everything I could to make her happy. I mean, I was,
that's
and again,
tough.
my wife saw the stress I was under,
Yeah.
because I mean, it was probably the most, other than the 7 years of school I had to go through, it was probably the most stressful period, because again, we're in a, we were I was out of work for 6 months before I found that job. So it's
yeah.
like we're getting our stuff together, and at the same time, I'm having to deal with this.
Yeah, that's tough.
And it became clear to me that I was not going to be working there very long.
Yeah.
So at the end, I'm like, okay, I'm done. So I knew that I was not going to want to go back to the corporate world.
Right,
I was done. So I was teaching. So I said, I'm going to transition to teaching. So I started teaching at different colleges, teaching stats and math. And because I had a master's degree, it was very easy to get in, and I already had the expertise.
And you enjoyed teaching.
And I
too.
enjoy teaching. I do. And so I started doing that. So I actually started, once I left, now it was a huge cut in pay. You make very good money as a statistician. And one of the reasons why I ended up going into statistics was not only because I enjoy data, but also because it's obviously a good career path.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing too. I'll back up a little bit.
Sure.
The reason why I even chose statistics was because when I was researching statistics or becoming a statistician, Time Magazine had just come out with a volume basically stating that for the next 30 to 40 years, statistics is the career path of the future.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And that's still true today, because analytics is becoming more and more and more
absolutely.
important in business decisions and across the board. Marketing, you name it, everything is touched by data now.
Yeah.
And so that was a big thing for me to go into that.
Yeah.
So, but after coming to the conclusion that was not for me, I just started teaching. So I started applying at different colleges. So I started teaching at different colleges to make a full-time income. It was not close. It wasn't what I was making before, but I was much less stressed out.
Right.
And I was happier. So that's where we're at. And so in the time, I'm playing pool and stuff like that. And again, because I'm an entrepreneurial type, I'm always looking for an opportunity to start a business. And so I had always done different things from the time I was 13 on. I'd always gotten the bug of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so when I found out by happenstance that you could own a franchise of the APA, I'm in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is
Sign me
perfect. This is perfect. I love pool. I'm entrepreneurial. I love the idea of owning a franchise like this. And so I started inquiring about it. I even called down to corporate. I had talked to Nick Diaz, who was the owner at the time, kind of like picking his brain about like what it is. And so then he got me in touch with somebody at corporate. And so we were going to open a new, in fact, we were looking across the country. I was even entertaining the ideas of maybe we could move.
Yeah.
But then that wasn't going to happen. That was not going to be feasible. So I decided to look in areas closer.
Okay.
And in the end, it just wasn't going to work out. Just too many variables. And so I kind of put that off on the table and just I started working. And I ended up stopping to play pool because we ended up, we needed to focus on some other stuff like finances and stuff that I wanted to clean up. And so I stopped playing pool for about 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
And then when I came back, let's see, I stopped in 2016, I think. And then I came back in 2020, so about 4 years.
Okay.
And so when I came back, we just started playing pool. I'd stopped playing pool, and Joy and I again were like, you know what? We had come a long way
Yeah.
with what we were dealing with our financial situation and things like that. And we had come back to play pool, and we had played for about 6 months. And I decided to play my first tournament on a Saturday. Joy was at a seminar in Texas, and I remember saying, I'm going to go play a tournament.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was playing in the tournament. It was funny because I got there. I did two. It was two, and I was done. So I lost my two first, and I was done. So it was real quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there. I just figure, well, I've got nothing better to do. So I sat there. I was talking to the guy running the tournament, Roy Radsis. And we were just chatting it up, and he had said, "Hey, you know that?" Well, at the time, while I was gone, Nick Diaz had sold the league to another player, Matt Nichols.
Okay.
And so Matt Nichols owned the league when I came back, and so he said, "Hey, Matt's selling the league, right?" And I'm like, "He is?" And I was like, "Really?" And so literally, what I do is, "Hey, Roy, I gotta go." And so I walked out. I said, "Hey, bye," and I went out to my car, and I called Joy, and I said, "Joy, you'll never believe what's going on," because she knew I wanted to own the league, obviously. And she goes, and I go, "Well, Matt Nichols is selling the Fox Valley APA." He says, "Can I throw my hand?" I said, "We can do this."
Yeah.
And we're talking about it. We're talking. She says, "Go for it." So then I hung up the phone, and I called Matt.
Yeah.
And I said, "Matt, so I hear that you're selling league. Is that true?" He says, "Yes, it is." I says, "Okay. Now I know you have a couple other people that are bidding on it, but I want to throw my hat in the ring.
Yeah.
Is it too late?" And he says, "No." And so literally from that point forward, I had called corporate, or he had actually got corporate and said that I was interested. They got in hold of me, and I already knew that they already knew me and from
previous,
before.
yeah.
And so they got on the phone, and we started talking, and literally within 2 weeks, we had a deal done.
Wow.
Now we didn't sign off on the deal for almost, let's say that was in June. That was in June. We didn't actually close until September.
Okay.
Because there was a lot of moving parts that we had to take care of. Now I ended up taking over the league in August. The cool thing about Matt was that he ended up training me in all the stuff even before I go and train. So to go through the corporate training, because he wanted me to take over running things.
Okay.
And so the cool thing is he actually helped me and how to do everything.
Yeah.
Even before I actually officially took over.
That's nice.
And so I got to meet, and so he announced things, but yeah, that's how I actually got it. But I've, and the thing is timing was perfect. It was really the timing, and that's, like I said before, the timing didn't work out 5 years before, but now it was like everything worked out fine. And it's been a blast. We've now owned the league for almost, it's been 2.5 years, and I'm having a blast. I'm enjoying it. I love all the players. I mean, in the beginning it was rough. I mean, just like any new business, you make mistakes and you make decisions, and your ego gets in the way. And of course, I'm no different.
Sure. Yeah.
And especially when you've got a bunch of different personalities in the players and you, and you're trying to set a precedence, not a precedence, but set a way of doing things, like setting not an example, but like giving, hey, this is the way things are going to run, right? And you're trying to, and so of course mistakes were made, and I trust me, I learned from those mistakes, and but now I feel, right now, I even was thinking about this yesterday and the day before. It's like I feel like right now I've got everything pretty much the way it's like running smoothly. I've worked out all the kinks. And it's now it's like I want to grow now that I've got a system in place.
Yeah.
I'm all about systems. One of
Yeah.
the things I've learned is I made the mistake in other businesses. Like I used to be in multi-level marketing. I love multi-level marketing.
Okay,
I
yeah.
love direct sales. And the biggest problem with that I learned in business is personality-driven businesses versus systems-driven
Okay, yeah,
businesses.
yeah.
Some of the businesses I've had were personality, where I built a team, like in financial services. I was in financial services for 3 years, and I built a team
Yeah.
of 50 agents underneath me. I loved
Wow.
the idea of money, and I loved learning about it.
Yeah.
And but the thing is it was personality driven by me.
Okay.
So once I stopped doing what I was doing, it all started to decline, because if I stopped doing it, other people were like,
Gotcha.
see, and that's not a good business, right? So I had to learn that, okay, if you have systems, and I had a great quote that I just heard again yesterday. It says, most people rise to their goals, but what actually happens is you fall to the level of your systems. Systems run the business, and if you create a business that has good systems, then it will run the business for you without you having to run the business. And that's the mistake. And I was talking to somebody at the bank yesterday about this, and because they said, well, we're actually getting ready to buy another business.
Oh, wow.
I can't say anything about it yet because I don't count my chickens before they're hatched.
Yeah, it's
But
wise.
we should be up and running with our new business in the next 60 days.
Wow.
But she was like, well, how do you do it all? Says, you got to be the busiest man, because they also know I teach. And
Yeah.
and I explained to her, I says, yeah. And she says, well, I have this friend that he spends 70 hours a week on his business. I'm like, because he's doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And I've learned from that.
Yeah.
And I explained to her, I says, the idea of owning a business is not to be, I did not leave. Teaching, eventually I love teaching. I could do teaching until the day I die. But but that's a preference. But the thing is nobody leaves a job that you're working, like I was working 40 to 60 hours a week at my job, even salaried, right? And that's even worse, because, but nobody leaves a job to go start a business, then be chained to your business, working the same amount of hours.
Yeah.
What was the point?
Yeah, right.
I mean, you can make more money, but again, the idea, so this is what I told her, and I believe this, and I've learned this, and it's 100% true. And I heard this, I can't remember the guy's name, but when he said this, it was like, absolutely, 100%. He said, and this is my opinion, that I agree with him.
Yeah.
Not everybody is entrepreneurial, and that's okay. But in my opinion, the only reason to have a job is to make enough money, save enough money so that you can start your own business, so that way you can buy your time back. Because I learned at a very young age that I did not want to be working for 40 years and have nothing to show for it. And so because I grew up extremely poor. I mean, we and I'll digress for a little bit, because this is very important for my makeup.
Absolutely.
Is that, growing up in a household with just 5 kids and a single parent, because my parents got divorced when we were 6, and on the top of that, I'm an identical triplet.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
So there's 3 of us,
Yeah.
3 boys in the house, all the same age, right? We got 5, and my mom did everything she could to keep the roofs up. But we grew up extremely poor. We grew up in McHenry, in a nice, middle class neighborhood, but we were the poorest kids in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Other kids had nice things, we didn't. And like, for example, I tell when we cover certain topics in class, I'll tell my students, like, going to McDonald's was a treat for us. Okay, we didn't go to McDonald's like everybody else did.
Yeah.
I remember the fancy restaurants. You want to talk about fancy restaurants?
Yeah.
The fancy restaurant that we went to was an 8th grade graduation. And I remember, because we were in our suits for 8th grade graduation. After 8th grade graduation, we got to go to Red Lobster.
Yeah.
And I was so excited,
because
that was the fanciest restaurant we had ever been to.
Yeah.
I mean, now I go. I look at Red Lobster. I understand that it's not the fanciest restaurant. I mean, it's not a Gibson's, but for a 14, 15-year-old kid who's never had anything. We grew up in hand-me-downs. I mean, there were 5 years in high school and 8th grade where we didn't celebrate Christmas. Well, we did, but we didn't get gifts. We
Yeah.
didn't get gifts for our birthdays. So growing up in an environment where you are poor, and I mean poor,
Yeah.
where the and we were okay. We didn't see, the thing is growing up, we didn't know we were poor until we got older.
Right,
Because my
yeah.
mom I love my mom to death, is because she always was there, even though later on, I didn't find this out until I was, in my 40s. But my mom would get us up for school, and she would make sure we were on the bus, and she would go to work. She would clean people's homes. And she did that for a living. And then she would come home before we got home from school, and we would get home at 3. She would fix us. We always ate dinner like around 4 o'clock. And it's so funny because when I grew up, people were eating dinner at 5, 6 o'clock, and I'm like, we would eat dinner like at 3:30, 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And people would look at me like, don't everybody eat early like that? Yeah. But what I found out was my mom would cook us dinner because she had to get everything ready, because we needed to be ready. So when we went to bed, that she would go and work at the bars as a bartender overnight.
Wow.
So she would do that until like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then she would come home, get her, 3-4 hours of sleep.
Wow.
And then she would wake us up.
Yeah.
And so we never knew my mom was doing all
That's
this
amazing.
for years. In fact, she didn't divulge this until just like 5 years ago. She was over at the house, and she was talking, and she divulged this, and we looked at each other as like, but that was my mom. The other thing that my mom did she was a wise woman in this, is that she would force us to sit down. Whenever Oprah Winfrey was interviewing somebody who was successful,
Yep.
she would force us to sit on the couch and watch them. And even though we didn't want to, she said, nope, tough luck.
Yeah.
And so that was my first introduction to people who were self-made millionaires.
Okay,
People
yeah.
who were successful. And even though I didn't like it, I sat there and learned a lot. There was one guy I'll never forget, had red suspenders, older guy, he had to be in his 60s, but he would talk about how he got his first paper route, 10 cents a paper, and he saved his money. He mowed lawns. So that's what I did. When I was 13,
Yeah.
I would mow lawns. I had a paper route. And so I learned at a young age is this entrepreneurial spirit that
Yeah.
man. And I remember being giddy, happier than a pig in mud, walking home after a long day of mowing people's grass, and I had $113 cash in my pocket.
Yeah.
And I'm walking home like I felt like I was
On
on top of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was. I felt rich.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't, but
Yeah.
but that was the thing. It's like, man. And go down to the place and buy your own ice cream.
Yeah.
and rent movies, and it's like I
huge.
had my own money.
Yeah.
And and my mom would always, she was not, she was a very hard woman in that she didn't mess around. And she would always tell us that in her own loving way, I like to joke around, but she said, if you don't want to be cleaning somebody else's toilets, or if you don't want to be pumping somebody else's gas, you better stay in school, keep your nose in the books, and go to college. And we were the first. My brothers and I were the first to go to college in our family, and which was a remarkable thing. And so again, because of my brothers we were so close and competitive, that's probably what bred the competitiveness, because I would always compete with them in school and sports and everything.
Wow. Academically, like you said, I'm sure you're competing with your grades as well.
Yes.
That's
So my
amazing.
brother was valedictorian of the high school.
Oh, wow.
And so we're all competing for those top ones. And so I've always had that competitive about me. Like, for example, when I graduated, got my bachelor's degree, I graduated magna cum laude.
Okay.
Because, I mean, if I'm going to do something, I'm not going to it's like, why put my money? Because it's my money.
Right.
I'm going to get the best out of it.
Yep.
And so I've always said to myself, if it's worth doing the best I can do.
Yeah.
And I've always applied that to everything
I
I've
like
done.
that. Yeah.
And so so this whole idea, like this entrepreneurial has always been with me. Because the other thing too is I would watch these people because we were so poor, I would watch these people on TV and watch how they have all these nice cars and nice things,
Yeah.
and I would dream. I would literally sit in bed, staring at the ceiling, dreaming about what it would be like
Yeah.
to not worry about money.
Yeah.
And so that always was a drive for me. It still is.
Yeah.
It's always a drive. And so the thing is the thing that my mom could not teach me about was money. Mm-hmm. She didn't have any money.
Right.
How was she going to teach me about money? And so even though I made good money, like I remember it, and I tell this story to my students too when we talk about this, but I remember I was 20. Oh, how old was I? 22, 21. I had done telemarketing. I found out that I was good at sales. I was very analytical. I was an introvert. I did not think that I would ever be in a sales position because to talk to people,
Yeah.
I was like to go into somebody's home or to actually try to sell somebody
Yep.
something. I was like, are you kidding me? But what I found out was, to go back to systems, a friend of mine who convinced me to go into sales because I was in a telemarketing where I was on the phone talking to people, and that was my first experience doing telemarketing. And I had and it was out of a guy. The owner was there, and I was visiting some friends that I had just met, and it was, he said something to me. He said, "Oh, you won't do good at this." He said, "You probably won't." Because I was cocky.
Okay,
I was
yeah,
cocky.
yeah.
I'm 20, 21.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, you probably won't do well at this." I'm like, "Really?" So I said, "Hire me on.
Yeah.
Hire me on." And within a year, I was the top salesman. But here's the thing: I was making equivalent of $60,000 a year cash.
Wow. Yeah.
But I had nothing to show for it. I was spending money on nice things. Like I was. I looked the part. Like I had when it was all said and done, 1996. I had a Firebird. I had a cherry red T-top Firebird. It was a 35. Now this is 1996.
Yeah,
It was $35,000 car.
That is
in
back
1996.
then. That's crazy.
So that's almost $100,000 car now.
Yeah.
So, but here's the thing, I couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to save money or do it. And so because I didn't have that, the knowledge, I thought this is how rich people live.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm spending money. Have this, and like I'm going out with the guys, going out to the clubs, and I'm dropping $75 tips, and I'm going through thousands of dollars over a weekend, and at the end of the day, I have nothing to show for it. And so it wasn't until I was down at Cape Girardeau. So again, I got into selling vacuum cleaners, and I found, again, because there was a routine, there was a system, how to sell. And I knew that if I did the routine, if I followed the system, I would sell machines. And so I did very well. And I was a branch manager down in Cape Girardeau. And I did that for a year and a half, and then moved to St. Louis, where my friend was the division rep, the same guy that got me into sales.
Yeah.
He was the division rep up in St. Louis, division manager. And one day, I'll never forget it, I was there. And mind you, by the way, what has happened because of my inability to handle money, I didn't understand money. My car was repossessed. I made 1.5 payments on that car, and it was repossessed 2 years later. I got really good at avoiding the repo man.
Yeah.
But I looked the part. People would look at me and say, "Oh yeah, that guy." No, I didn't.
Wow.
So I'm there, right, and I get introduced to this guy who's there talking to Frank, and Frank introduced me to this guy, Jeff Huggins. And Jeff Huggins owned a chain of New Lady Fitness gyms and Gold's gyms across Tennessee and in St. Louis. And he was up there. And he was talking to Frank about financial services, and he introduced me to him, and so we started talking. And somewhere along the conversation, he asked me, "Have you ever thought about going into financial services?" And I'm like, "No, I don't. I don't know nothing about money. Why? What would I do?"
Yeah.
And he says, "Well, you know how to read, right?" I mean, without skipping me, you know how to read, right? I mean, so I got like set me on my heels a little bit, like, yeah, I know how to read. And he says, "Well, you can study, right?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "Well, all you have to do is you have to go through a background check, fill out the application. You take a class at 80 Banker. You go through the 6-week course, and there's a test. As long as you study for the test and you pass the test, you get to have your Series 6 and 63, which allows you to be able to work with qualified plans and help people with their retirements."
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
But here's the problem. The cost just to do the application fee, which included the 10-year FBI background check, was $500.
Oh, wow.
$500 to $600.
Yeah.
I didn't have the money.
Yeah.
Now, imagine how sad that is. At 20, I was 25. 25 years old, and I don't even have $500 to my name to invest in myself. That was a blow.
Yeah.
That was an ego check.
Yeah.
And so what I did, and again, this was a watershed moment for my life, because this literally transformed, this whole experience transformed the trajectory, the financial trajectory of my life, because I had to come to grips that I was not, reality, everybody's good at fooling themselves. Human beings are really good at fooling themselves.
Yep.
But I had to come to the realization to look at myself in the mirror and say, you know what? You're in a world of hurt.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I ended up pawning pretty much almost everything I had. I had some gold rings, and I had some other stuff that I ended up pawning off just to get the money.
Wow.
To put the application.
Yeah.
So I did that, and it was the best 3 years of my life, education-wise, as far as with what I did and what I learned about money.
Yeah.
Because through Jeff Huggins, who became sort of a mentor of mine, he introduced me to great books to read. Not only did I learn about qualified plans, I learned about all of the different laws and how to help people with their retirements and money, but I also learned about how I viewed money, because what I found out by reading books like The Richest Man in Babylon,
Love that one.
The Millionaire Next Door, The Millionaire Mindset, I learned about how the wealthy really live, because the bottom line is most people, and I do this with my students a lot, and it's true for my students, and I know it's true for most people. They have this idea about how the wealthy live in America.
Yep.
And it's totally 100% untrue.
Yeah, it is.
And so, and I learned principles. I learned principles of how the wealthy become wealthy, because what I do know from statistics, because this is this is actually what kind of got me into statistics, was my whole delve into the wealthy. I started reading books on the data of what wealthy people look like, and it's not what you see in the celebrities.
Yeah.
Because I used to think that, the wealthy, they drive around in Rolls Royces, and
like
they have
you said, people are good at fooling themselves.
Right.
Look around social media.
But here's the fact: the vast majority of people you see on the street that drive those Lexuses, that drive those BMWs, can't even afford them.
Buried in debt.
If those people that live in those big houses, if they lost their job tomorrow and didn't find gainful employment in 6 months, they would lose it all.
Yeah.
Most
crazy.
Millionaires don't live like that. The typical millionaire doesn't live like that. So I had to it was a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And so those 3 years I actually figured it out.
Yeah.
And so for the last 25 years now, I've stick to those principles. Now, again, it's been a roller coaster ride, just like everything else. But that was the turning point for me. Having that year in reading all the books. I still read those books. I still read books. I've read several dozen books on the area of success and wealth, and I've applied basically every single principle. That's why I own businesses.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I love what I'm doing.
That's beautiful.
It's been, I won't say it's been easy.
I'm sure it's been
rough.
challenging.
When and again, throwing a family in the mix, so 25 to 30. So I got married when I was 30.
Yeah.
And so then to throw kids in the mix, that's a whole new dynamic, right?
Yeah, I'm sure.
But here's the thing. I went from, and this is the power of principles, and this is the power of systems. I went from being broke. I was 25 and broke.
Yeah.
I had a beater car because the car got repoed.
Yep. Yeah.
But in 3 years, I went from having nothing saved to having over $35,000 of investments.
Wow.
I had bought my first 2 investment real estate properties.
Wow.
And I had paid all of my bills.
Wow.
All of my bills were paid a year in advance. So my rent, my car insurance, my phone, my electric and gas, everything was paid a year in advance.
Wow. Yeah.
And because I had gone hyper
in
that direction. But the thing is, and I'll tell my students, but one day I'll never forget, I was going down the highway and just thinking about where I was at. And it dawned on me that if I quit my job and didn't do anything, I would be good for the next year.
That's powerful.
And it dawned on me this is what financial freedom feels like. And when
amazing.
when I felt that, and when I realized that that's what wealthy people, that's what it's like. I said, I never want to lose this ever again. And that's what I've always wanted for my family.
Wow.
And so that drives me. That's what actually drives me, is the idea, not for me. It's about creating enough wealth and building something that my grandkids, not my kids will be fine because that's what I've been teaching them and instilling them. It's on them.
Yeah.
But my grandkids,
Yep.
when I'm dead and gone, I want something left behind that they will be taken care of. And it's about generational wealth.
Yeah.
For me, it's about generational wealth. My wife and I live comfortably, but we're okay with we're okay with where we're at.
Yeah.
And the thing is I took everything in heart about everything I've read, because we don't buy, not like I did buy my wife a Lincoln because she deserved it and she wanted it and we bought it.
Yeah.
But I don't drive fancy cars. We don't live in a fancy house because to me, none of that stuff matters anymore.
Right.
I know other people who drive really fancy cars, and that's fine. If you can afford it and you can buy it, go for it. But I would rather be able to do what I want, when I want, with whomever I want, for as long as I want.
Yeah.
That's more important to me.
The time and the freedom, rather than the objects.
Exactly. Yeah. The things don't matter to me. It used to, but now it's fun because I realize that I'm very happy with where we're at. And all of that stuff. Yeah. Would it be nice to own an Aston Martin? Absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe one day I'll buy one. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
But it's not on my radar right now.
Yeah.
And even if I could, I don't know whether I'd really buy one, because again, it's like, okay, am I buying it because I just want to show off?
Yeah. Right.
That's just not me.
Yeah.
Again, it's about, being able to do, and it really comes down to being able, this is, again, me. Me it's about the freedom to do what I want, when I want, with whomever I want, for as long as I want. And the thing is there's a great book, another great book by a great author who basically lives this. And his name is Tim Ferriss, who wrote the book, The 4-Hour Workweek.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I'm wrong. I'm sorry. I get my books mixed up. No, The Psychology of Money.
Okay.
The Psychology of Money.
That one I don't think I know.
You have to read that book,
Okay,
because The Psychology of Money. Now,
Yeah.
again, the author says it that for him, for everybody it's different. But when he said this, it spoke to me, because this is the way I am.
Yep.
It's not about having the big cars, because
Yeah.
or the nice cars in the big house,
Yep.
all the things that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Because it used to be that way. It's like the drive was, I want to show everybody else
Yeah.
how successful
That's
I am.
a tough- yeah.
But it was but it was a maturity thing for me because it was like, because I was so insecure, because it's like when you grow up as poor as I have, the only thing you have is the idea that I'm going to show everybody
Yeah.
that I'm successful. And the way that as a really poor kid is like to have it all.
Yeah, you
Because
got everything to prove.
exactly. And so for a long time, I struggled with the insecurity and the idea that in order for me to feel good about myself, I had to have everybody see me with all these things.
Yeah.
Because then they would know that I was smart,
Yeah.
that I was good enough. And,
Yeah.
But then
like I told you so kind of thing.
not even that, but yeah, there were like a lot of those people that said, "Oh, you'll never make it. Oh,
Yeah.
that'll fail." It's
Yeah.
like, you know,
Yeah.
or you know, the naysayers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is that now I'm at a point where I realize I don't need any of that stuff, and it's really about the time freedom. It's really about the freedom of choice.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing: people who have money have more choices than
Yeah.
poor people.
Yeah.
And the thing is also, and this is a big one for me, is if you want to help other people, and you have to have money. And it's not a materialistic thing, but the bottom line is it takes people with money to help people that don't have money. And I love the fact that most millionaires give more to charity,
Yeah.
especially in the United States. People want to bash the
Yeah.
rich so much in this country,
Yep.
but they don't understand that the rich are the ones that give the most money to help the most people in need.
Yeah.
And Americans and give more money to victims of natural disasters around the world than any other people group. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And the thing is that the people that create the jobs, the business owners, the wealthy people that create these companies,
Yeah.
and I'll tell this to my students, is like people are so quick to bash the rich,
Yeah.
but they don't stop to think, well, they're the ones creating the jobs.
Yeah.
They're the ones. Yeah. So
Right.
they don't pay, and then there's this whole argument about not paying your fair, their fair share in taxes.
Yeah.
Again, that's debatable. I'm not
Yeah.
going to go down that road, but again, I encourage people to read the data.
Right.
I think they do. I think they pay more than their fair
Yeah.
share. But the thing is, even if they don't, right? Here's the thing. They don't understand the tax laws were created for entrepreneurs and business owners and the innovators, right?
Yeah.
It was for an incentive. They give them an incentive because they're the ones creating jobs.
And create value.
Right.
In the
They're
marketplace.
creating
Yeah.
jobs. And by the way, they're the ones taking on the risk.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So unless you want to go start your own business and put up the 100 or 200 or $500,000
Yeah.
of capital,
Yeah.
right? Or if you want to go to the bank and try to get a $500,000 of capital to start your own business and take that risk of losing it all and having, then fine, go for it. But here's the thing: if you're not willing to do that, then.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think to round it all out, I think my thing is that for me, it's more important to be able to leave something behind that will help other people. And I'll say this, and then we'll go on to another subject. But one thing that was said to me because again, back in the day they had VHS, and so I would listen to a lot of motivational speakers. And one of the things is, and I really, really, really attribute the person I've become today at 51, as opposed to the person I was when I was 21, is the books I've read and the people I've met and the videos and now the TikTok videos and stuff that I watch, is because it's self-improvement.
Yeah.
Jim Rohn, who was a guy that I admired and for a long time, along with Anthony Robbins, he said one thing. He said that if formal education will earn you a living, going to school and stuff like what I did will earn you a living, and you can earn a very good living. I can attest to that. But if you want to earn a fortune, it's self-education, and most people stop learning after they get their degree or after they graduate high school. And so I was lucky and fortunate enough to come across a couple of good books that really instilled in me this idea of constant learning. And my mom too. My mom instilled that into us too at a young age of reading
Yeah.
and this love for learning. And so all of that plays a part. And so, the idea of improving yourself, because again, we're all screwed up, and I'm no different. I come from a very, very screwed up background. My home life sucked. And so it's been a long road to hoe, and I credit my wife, Joy, who has been probably my biggest support, my biggest cheerleader, and the biggest person that pushed me on being better. And she herself, I mean, she reads, and so we both are very big into self-improvement and learning about ourselves. And so and so in the beginning, a lot of the books I've read from Jim Rohn, and another great book, a guy that I really respected, was Zig Ziglar.
Oh, okay.
And Zig Ziglar said this, and this is what I was trying to get to, was that he said something, and it stuck with me for the rest of my life to this day. It said, if you want success, if you want to be successful, then remember this. He said, if you want to get everything you want out of life, help as many people as you can get what they want out of life. And so I learned from that of being a servant to others, try to be a service to others, find something that will help other people, to serve other people. Because if you do that, then ultimately, eventually, it'll come back to you tenfold or more.
Yeah.
And that has happened in my life. And so I believe that 100%. And so in every business I've taken on, it's always been on the idea of, okay, how can I help people?
Yeah.
Because that's got, if you're not in it to help people, if you're in it for the money, that was another thing. If you're in it for the money, you'll fail.
Yeah.
I said, if you chase the money, it's not about the money.
Yeah.
And the CEO of Zappo once said, he said, don't chase the money, chase the vision. If you chase the vision, the money will come. And so all that ties into what if you find a way to help people, if you find something that helps people, and your focus is on helping people, and your focus is on the vision of what you have, then the money will eventually come. And that's what I've always tried to focus on.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's
Yeah.
that was a lot to unpack.
That was like more than gold. What you just said. That was beautiful. Thank you.
No, you're very welcome.
You did kind of cover a lot of the questions that I was going to ask you. One of the biggest being with the impact that your mother left on you, and all these achievements that you've taken on, and what you're still taking on to this day. How much, in coming from me who is engaged, and how big of a role does the support of your wife play in the challenges that you go through on a daily basis, and in the businesses that you're running?
It is vitally important. It's been said, and I don't know who the original person that has said this, but it's been said multiple times, is that 90% of your happiness will come from the person you choose to marry. Your success and failure in life will come down to the woman you decide to marry. That is absolutely 100% true. Men, I can only speak for men, men want to be appreciated, period. If you have a woman that is by your side, that will push you and appreciate you for the hard work. I tell Joy all the time that I will kill monsters for her. I will slay dragons.
Yeah.
I will climb mountains because of her. Because she is the person that, because men will go to battle for when there's support there from a woman. And the picture that comes to my mind is King Leonidas. And in the movie 300, King Leonidas had a woman, and King Leonidas wasn't somebody to be trifled with. And so in the movie, now again, it's not exactly what you read in the histories, but in the movie, the where he basically turns, and there's the messenger, and he's threatening the messenger, and he turns and basically looks at his wife, and she gives the nod. right?
Yeah.
So it's it's a great
powerful.
scene.
Yeah.
But see, the thing is
subtly powerful.
Joy is that woman that she's always my strongest support.
Mm-hmm.
She's always the one that says, "You got this."
Mm-hmm.
And we do the same thing. I do. She's a rock star. I do the
Yeah.
same thing for her. And so we work off of each other because I know when she says, "Honey, there's nothing you can do," she says, "You go for it," or she'll whisper in my ear, "Honey, you got this." It's like I'm on.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It does not matter what comes in front of me. I will bulldoze over it.
Yeah.
I will work around it. I'll do something because of her.
Yeah.
So to go back to your point is, you got to have somebody that appreciates you as a man. And if you have somebody that appreciates you and believes in you, and trusts you, then that's all.
Yeah.
You know, you can go out and slay dragons.
Yeah.
But the thing is if you don't have that as a guy, if you don't have that, it becomes very difficult
Yeah.
to overcome that.
Yeah.
Because if it's not at home, if you're not the king of your castle, how are you expect to go out there and do something out there? I just don't, again, that's me.
Yeah, this reminds me of a quote that I had read in a book. I believe the book was The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump, actually, and he says that the woman makes the man, and that kind of runs along those lines.
Yes, it does.
I kind of like that quote. And that's,
that's true. There's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a really powerful subject, and it
yes
speaks volumes, especially being newly engaged, and that's
well. And so, since you're newly engaged, I'll give you some advice. The toughest thing, is this: you've got to put everything on the table, and you've got to discuss all of the important things, and it's the tough conversations that you don't want to have. Like, for example, money. Money is the number one reason for people getting divorced.
Yeah.
And people think that you get engaged and you see things that you don't agree on, and you kind of shovel it, you sweep it under the rug, and you say, well, we'll figure that out after we get married. No. The bottom line is, if you think it's going to all of a sudden resolve itself, it's not.
Yeah.
If you don't talk about it now before you get married, it's just going to be there and get worse. And if you don't resolve it before then, and think that, well, we'll figure it out afterwards. No, it doesn't work that way. It's just gonna be a problem. And it comes from there's a I can't remember the book, but there was there are 5 things. I can't remember the 4th thing, but there's 5 things that it was a psychologist who said, okay, these are the top 5 things you need to discuss. You need to work out. And one, money, and this isn't in any particular order, but money was number 1. So money, religion, what faith you're going to raise the kids, and what else? Money, faith. In-laws. In-laws was one.
Yeah.
And what was the 4th one? Money, faith. I can't remember was it schooling? No. Anyway, I can't forget. But there are 5 now. I can only remember 3. See where. So, but there's the bottom line is whatever you guys would disagree, you got to throw it all on the table, and you've got to work it out and at least come to an agreement or compromise. Okay. And I'm going to tell you, marriage is all about compromise and communication. And but here's the thing. And I know people are not going to like this, but oh well.
Please.
Somebody's got to lead in the home.
Yeah.
So you each get a vote, right? But at some point, somebody's got to lead. Right. I believe it's got to be the husband. We all have our roles, and whether you agree with me or not, that's fine. And whoever's listening, I mean, that's fine. We can agree to disagree, and that's fine. But I believe that and that's where the trust and the faith and the support come in from the wife, because I believe the husband bears the responsibility of leading the family.
This goes along with your idea of the systems as well,
Right,
too.
yeah.
Where you see some systems or other families that are unhappy, and then you look at successful people, and even if it's successful in your own eyes, they have like this sort of a setup, this sort of system.
Yeah, and it's like okay, like for example, I'll just use money. Let's say you come to a disagreement on something to do with the finances, right? Again, everybody gets a vote, right? So your husband, I vote one way, Joy votes the other way, right? So we're at a standstill. So
Then
what do we
what?
do,
Yeah.
right? So we try to compromise, but what if it's something that you can't compromise on? What if it's something that there's no compromise? And there are going to be situations
Yeah,
where
yeah.
it's going to come to, well, we've got to make a decision. And so I believe that it in the end, the husband makes the decision. The wife has to trust her husband that he's going to make the best decision with the information that he has for the betterment of the family, because somebody's got to lead. Can't have two leaders.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's very powerful.
I've never seen it work. I've never seen, when there's two people that want to try to lead the family, it always ends with a fight.
Yep.
And it always, or it ends in divorce. Right. So at some point, and the thing is it's not, I don't take that lightly. When Joy and I disagree with something and it comes to the point where, okay, she's going to trust me, and it comes back to having that woman, having somebody that has faith in you, that trusts you,
Yep.
and that appreciates the work that you do. And again, it goes the other way too. I love Joy. I love my wife, and I trust her, and I have faith in her, but we both have different roles. She and we help each other, and that's what makes this work really well, because we balance each other out. Because there's things about me that she smooths out, and there's things about her that I smooth out, and we both have our strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And so we recognize that there are things that Joy is better at than I am. She is the heart of our family, and I said that's true. That's like she's what makes our family a home. I'm more of the head. I mean, I am. I'm a very cut and dry kind of person, where, and I tend to be rigid.
Yeah.
So, and I lovingly say that it's funny because it's true. Because like I'm the head of the household,
Yeah.
but she's the neck.
Yeah.
And the neck always turns the head. Right? Yeah. And I love that.
Yeah.
Because
I really
she
like
does
that.
know how to get to me, because there are times where I'm wrong, and she knows that. And there's times where I have to admit that
Yep.
she has a valid point, because I have to be able to be mature enough and listen to her. And again, that comes to the point of being able to communicate. That's where the communication comes in. I have to be able to listen to her, and she has to be able to listen to me, and both have to be safe.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the key word. We have to be safe to be able to talk to each other and tell each other what we feel, how we feel, without being judgmental, and without having those little daggers come out.
Right.
And then being able to decide, and most of the time we compromise.
Yeah.
Right. And especially, like, for example, we used to fight about money all the time. And it was all literally almost once a month, multiple times a month, because we were never on the same page with money.
Yeah.
So this goes back to my original. We never had this conversation before we got married, and when we got married, I didn't realize this, but it became very clear that we both valued money differently, even though we both grew up dirt poor. I just figured we were on the same page, because she knew me long before I got married. We've known each other. We've been married for 20 years. We've known each other for like 26 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so and she knew where I came from, and she knew what I was doing, even when I went from, being penniless and having money. So I just figured she was on board, and she knew where we were going and how I was steering the ship.
Sure. Yeah.
No. Not at all.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of friction for many years. 15 years. The first 15 years of our marriage was very, very tenuous when it came to finances, because we weren't on the same page. And we finally did, and I have to credit Dave Ramsey, in his book, The Total Money Makeover, which we happened to have on our bookshelf at the time, even though she had bought it. I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of budgeting. I believe in budgets.
Yeah.
Most millionaires, 85% of millionaires live on a budget. Okay. I always believed in budgeting your money. John C. Maxwell once said that, a budget puts you in control of your finances. A budget allows you to tell you where your money allows you to know where your money is going instead of wondering where it went. That's what he would say.
Yeah.
And so, but Joy didn't like budgets. She looked at budgets as if they were a prison.
Restrictive. Yeah.
Restrictive.
Okay.
She felt like whenever we would talk about budgets, she didn't even want to talk about it because every time I would mention budget, it was like she looked at it as like a control issue. Now, here's the thing. Joy came from a previous marriage where her ex-husband was very controlling about the finances. Okay. So she had a lot of psychological baggage and other baggage that came from that marriage that she would attribute. And again, these are things that we had to work through. So she looked at it as a controlling thing.
Yeah.
And so every time I would bring up the budget, I would try to reason with her, but she was not having it.
Yeah.
And so I understood where she was coming, but it still did not make it easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, because here I am, I'm thinking this, in order to get where we want to go, like she would say, I want to enjoy our money while we're young. I don't want to be old and have all this money and not enjoy it. Where my perspective was, I don't want to be working at Walmart as a greeter, handing out carts.
Yep.
At 60 and not being able to enjoy my life, right? So sacrificing now to have more later, and so again, so that was it, right? So value, right? It's about how you value and see money.
Absolutely, yeah. And patience, a lot of patience, I'm sure.
Yes. And the funny thing was I was teaching because I got to the point where I was thinking I'll never be able to retire, even though I'm working my butt off and I'm doing all this. And so at some point I was like, after 10 years, I started losing hope, and I said, and that's when I started teaching because I had read all these books, and I said I was teaching, and I said, you know what, I mean, I might as well share this with the next generation.
Yeah.
Because even if my life isn't going the way I want it, and even if I can't get it to work with my wife, and we're going through that, I said, at least I can help somebody else. Maybe if what I share with them helps the next generation somehow, at least I'll leave this. That going back to serving other people.
Yeah.
Right? So I started sharing these, what I called to my class, I started sharing these golden nuggets. And I started with the same book that I started with, which was The Richest Man in Babylon. And so I would share, because I taught mostly statistics, I figured it's a great platform to teach this stuff.
Was that the first book you started with?
Yeah, the first book I ever read.
Because that was same with me, first one.
Yeah, so Jeff Huggins, this was Jeff Huggins because he was my mentor. That was the book he said I had to read.
Yeah.
So I figured, okay, so I started teaching them these. Now I didn't teach them all the principles, but the first 3 I would go through. And so I started teaching them these principles. And so one day, I think after 3, I think it was 3 years. 2017.
Okay.
2017, a student, after I was going through these principles, one of the principles, he raised his hand and he asked me, have you ever heard of a guy by the name of Dave Ramsey? And I looked at it and says, I've heard the name, but I don't know anything about it. I know he's like some finance guy, but I have no idea who he is other than that. And he said, you sound just like him. And I said, well, now I have to look him up, right? And so the whole class started laughing. And so, I did. I said, I went home. I was on my way home, and I called Joy, and I said, Joy, you'll never know what happened. I said, I was doing, da-da-da. And she said, and I told her what happened. She says, well, I think we have one of his books. I think I found one of his books. I'm like, really? And then, it's in the library on one of the bookshelves. And I said, go. So I got home, and I looked. Sure enough, there it was. Never read it. So I said, Joy, do you mind if we start reading this before we go to bed? And she said, sure. So what I did was I started reading passages out of the book, start with chapter 1.
Yep.
And so it's going through what he calls the baby steps.
Yeah.
And so in the baby steps, it's about, putting together, an emergency account. And so and we get to the budget, right? And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, so I'm like, oh my gosh, I had my eyes roll. I'm like, here we go.
Yep.
So I start reading. and we go through the budget. And I'm just reading, right? She's laying in bed. We're both in bed and we're reading. I'm reading about the budget and the cool thing about the book, The Total Money Makeover, it's full of stories, all these different stories.
Yeah,
Now,
like real life accounts.
Yeah. Now I didn't care about the stories because I've heard it all. I already believe all this stuff.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And in my mind, I'm sitting there, I'm hoping and praying that this would speak to her.
Yeah.
And so we're reading the book. We got through like the first 3 chapters, and so this is now it's been 2 weeks,
Yeah.
right? So we're 2 weeks, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I was in the office, and this is before. This is like I said, 2017.
Yeah.
And she comes in and she goes, I want to talk to you. And she said, okay. I'm like, what do you want to talk about? She says, well, I've been listening to Dave Ramsey's podcast. Now, I didn't even know he had a podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And she's like, well, I've been listening to all of these stories and all these people call in about the budgeting and about the paying off debt and his system, because he's big about paying off debt.
Yeah.
Now he says paying off debt is the most important thing.
Yeah.
You get your $1,000 emergency account and the rest is you pay off debt.
Yeah.
Which I hate debt too.
Yeah.
But again, see, the thing is what I didn't tell you earlier is I had built up a lot of money. I had a small real estate portfolio. I had two properties.
Yep.
And but what I didn't tell you is that because I didn't know the game, I just knew I loved real estate.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to play the game.
Yeah.
I lost it. I ended up losing everything. My credit ran in the toilet because I realized that I did not prepare for things like people didn't paying rent, right? When you're paying 3 mortgages, right? And so I went through a hard time where I lost pretty much everything and I had to start over. So I had this fear. And again, when you go through something like that, it really sticks with you. Like, for example, we had, and I'm not ashamed to say things like this, but there was a time where we almost lost our house to foreclosure because I did not make good financial decisions, and we were going through a tough time, and we had lost those properties, so we were in turmoil.
Yeah.
And so, so certain things like Robert Kiyosaki, who
Rich
I
Dad,
love,
Poor Dad.
Rich Dad Poor
Yeah.
Dad, who I had read, so all these dozens of books I had read that like the cash flow quadrant and stuff,
Yeah.
I enjoyed. All of that went out of my mind.
Yeah.
I no longer the fear had overtaken me. So
Like once burned, twice shy.
yeah. So in financial services, you're taught to save money, right? So I became an ultra saver, right?
Yeah.
And so that's part of how I was able to do that. But even though I lost the properties, I was still a saver, right? The idea of building a nest egg, right?
Yeah.
But the idea of putting capital and the idea of risk in that regard, it was better to put the money in the market, and I knew enough about the market and long-term savings, and I knew enough about the fact that there's never been a 20-year period in the stock market that you've lost money. So in long-term retirement, 30 years down the road, I was like, okay, that's safe for me, right? I don't care how the market does every day. I could care less.
Yeah.
So to fast forward to now or then. So so Joy comes in, right? So the budget, and she goes, and I almost fell off the bed, I don't know where I was.
Yeah.
But I almost fell on the floor when she said this. Is I'm ready to do a budget.
Wow.
And I was like, are you kidding me? And she said, you know what? I'm convinced. And she said, listening to all these people on his podcast talk about how being on a budget changed their future, and all these people calling in doing their debt-free scream or whatever it is, and saying that they paid off this amount of debt in this many years, and so it convinced her. So and I thanked my lucky stars, and I praised God for it, because it was only that. Because again, coming from me was different,
right?
But coming from somebody else, it made all the difference in the world. And so I was very thankful. And to be honest, I didn't say I told you so. I was just overjoyed that we were on the same page now.
Yeah.
And so here's the thing. And we've been on the budget for now, let's see, 6 years. 6 years we've been on the budgeting.
Yeah.
Now, I don't do the Dave Ramsey. We did the first 3 years, hardcore Dave Ramsey. I don't, now I've read other books and now I'm actually back. I've overcome my fear and now I'm back to where I don't know if you've ever read the book by Garrett Gunderson, Killing Sacred Cows, or
No.
There's another book by Laurel Langmeyer who's called The Millionaire Maker, or in Robert Kiyosaki. So Robert Kiyosaki, Laurel Langmeyer, and Garrett Gunderson are all in the same. They have a cash flow system.
Right.
Their idea is cash flow. That's where I used to be. The idea of building properties.
Yep.
And why I love real estate, it's
Yep.
about cash flow.
Yeah.
And that's what buying your time back. The whole idea of owning a
Right.
business is being able to scale it so that you have cash flow.
Yep.
And so I said no because
Yep.
the fear of losing all that money and getting my ass handed to me.
Yeah.
Because of and to be fair, I got into a game that I didn't know the rules to. And when you don't know the rules of a game, you're in for trouble.
Yeah.
So I said no. So I said, I'm just going to save my money
Yeah.
because I know that game.
Yeah.
But as I came back and I started reading more books and I started coming across people like Eric Gunderson, and this guy was talking about Dave Ramsey, like Dave Ramsey doesn't, because I became a big fan of Dave Ramsey. I still am.
Yeah.
But I also knew that his system wasn't the best system and is good for most people because most people can't handle debt. Most people do not know how to handle debt.
It's a good starting point.
Yes. And it's for people who need that system. And that's a great system. The baby steps is a fantastic system. I will never say it's not a great system. And but it's not the only system. So what I had to do is I had to come around full circle and I started reading books again by like Garrett Gunderson.
Yeah.
And in reading his books and Laurel Langmeyer, I started to remember Robert Kiyosaki. And so I started reading his books and I remembered what I had fallen in love with when I was 25 was the idea of building cash flow in, let's say, real estate, where you have passive income.
Yeah.
And if you can build enough passive income, which just for your audience, that what passive income is, also some call it residual income, like in financial services, the idea of when you sell a policy, you get what's called trails and renewals.
Okay.
So as long as that policy is in force, I make a little bit of money.
Yeah.
Like right now, like I also got into retail energy. Like my wife and I, Joy and I, we got into retail energy for 5 years. We built a business in retail energy with deregulation, gas and electric.
Okay.
Well, what happens? You get customers in Illinois and across the 26 deregulated states.
Yep.
Well, if you build customer bases, well, what happens? Every time they pay their bill, you make a little bit of money off of that. So the more customers you have.
Okay.
So what happens now, we make a little bit of money. Now, even though I have not worked that business it's been 5 years. No, it's been more than 5 years. We still get a deposit into our checking account every month from the work that we did.
Yeah.
That's residual income. That's passive income.
Wow.
Now, here's the thing. When people understand what residual income and what passive income is, they will walk through walls to get it.
Yeah.
Because that's the key to your financial and your time back. So what I started to remember was the idea that I was in what we call the accumulation camp, what I call the accumulation camp. I was in the camp that you're going to save, scrimp, and sacrifice for 30 years to have $1 million or $2 million or $3 million in your accounts, so you could retire, right? And so I also remembered and realized that retirement has nothing to do with your age. It has to do with having the amount of money. So whatever amount of money you need to live off of, that you want to have your lifestyle, whatever that is, that's your goal. However fast you get it is up to you. So I was in that camp for years, and I was happy with that.
Yeah.
And I knew what my financial number was.
Yeah.
I knew what I needed to do to get there. And the thing is that, but coming through these books of like the Millionaire, The Millionaire Maker and Killing Sacred Cows. What Garrett Gunderson does in his Killing Sacred Cows, he takes all the things from the accumulation camp and he exposes the what's the word? The problems, not problems. I hate to say problems. The cons, right?
Okay,
So you're
yeah.
putting your money into other people's hands. You're still taking risks,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So here's the thing: is in the cash flow camp, what I call the cash flow camp. It's all about what Laurel Langmeyer says. This she puts it so succinctly. She says, "Look, even if you have a job, even if you're a career person, that's okay." But she says, "Look, if you went through school," and I tell this to my students, and it's like a shocker to them because they don't expect this to come from a professor.
Yeah.
So I tell them, look, you're going through school and you're getting all of these skills. You're honing your skills for a particular trade or a particular skill set to what? Get a job, to get a career path, right? She says, look, why don't you use that skill set to build a business around? Find something that you would want to do. Take the skill set that you've worked years honing and becoming an expert in, and build a business. Find something you can build a business in.
Yeah.
And then what do? You build that business, right? So that way you can eventually, if you want to, which is the point, walk away from your job, build that business. Oops, sorry.
That's okay.
And build a business. And so what's the purpose of building a business? It comes back to what I said at the beginning.
Yep.
Is you want to, and this is her words, you want to build, you want to buy or invest in what we call passive or assets.
Yeah.
You want to buy assets, not any asset. You want to buy assets that will give you a passive income. That's why I love real estate.
Yeah.
Real estate, you buy an apartment complex,
Yeah.
right? I love multifamily dwellings. See, now that I'm going back into real estate, and that's the next step.
Yep.
That I love is that I know the game now.
Right.
I've read more books in the last year or 2 years that I know how to play the game. I know, and especially with my analytical background, it's like now I know it.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: that's why I'm excited about getting back into real estate because I know how to manage business debt. I'm not afraid of debt anymore. The thing is me. I can handle business debt, personal debt. I will pay that off and be debt free.
Yeah.
Business debt, I'm fine with. It's all about managing debt. If you can manage debt and you can handle managing debt, you're good. But you got to understand the rules. But here's the thing. So you get a business. The purpose of the business is to give you enough cash flow that you're paying your bills, and the extra money goes into buying assets that will build you a passive income. And then once you have enough passive income coming in, then you have a choice of what you want to do. You have more time, right? You're buying your time back, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we all want. That's why I think in my heart, most people do not want to work 40 years at a job to retire.
Yeah.
Okay. Retirement is a modern thing.
Yeah.
Retirement is a thing that comes from the 40s, right? From the New Deal and everything. This idea of a safety net and retirement. But before that, the idea of retirement, it was, the idea was, having something of your own and working as long as you want to work, do whatever you want. And that's what being, for me, an entrepreneurial is having that idea that I can do that.
Yeah.
And so that's why I started coming back. Now I'm kind of in, I tell my students, I said, I'm between two camps.
Yeah.
I see the value in the accumulation camp, but I also see the pitfalls.
Yeah.
I see the risk. But now I also, by dealing with cash flow,
Yeah.
I do both.
Yeah.
Because I see the value in both. And it's all about, for us, security. Now here, going back to the debt. I have friends, and I used to be like this. They leverage their mortgage, right? Because if you have a 3% interest rate on your house like we do, we have a 3% interest rate on our home. I can take the equity out of my house and I can invest it in the mortgage, into the market.
Yeah.
And I know I can get more than, I can get 7,
Yeah.
at least 7.
Yeah.
And 7 is conservative. And if I can get 7, then obviously I can get off the interest of that, investment.
Yeah.
I can pay my mortgage and then some,
Yeah.
right? So I have a friend in Texas that does that. And, he's totally happy doing that.
Yeah.
He's comfortable doing that. Me, I'm not. my risk tolerance when it comes to my personal assets,
Yeah.
my peace of mind is more important than making an extra 5% on the
Yeah.
market on my home.
Yeah.
So now here's the thing. That's the piece that people don't talk about. And that's the piece that I didn't think about. You have to think about the peace of mind aspect. My peace of mind is more important. My wife's peace of mind is more important. So being debt free and having our house paid off
Yeah.
is more important to us than taking the $300,000 or $250,000 out and putting it in the market.
Yeah.
Because that's the extra money isn't
Yeah, it's
important.
not-
I can make money
it's not
somewhere
worth
else,
the peace
right?
of mind, yeah.
Exactly. So, but other people might be okay with that. Like my friend in Texas, he and his wife, they're fine with
Yeah.
that. He's totally got it under control, and you know what? That's fine. Totally fine.
Yep.
It's wherever you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And the thing is I tell people like that. I said, look, never go outside your risk tolerance and never go beyond what you know. And Warren Buffett said it perfectly, and I'll end it with this. When I read his book, the Buffett Way, a long time ago, and it was during the .com in 2007 too, where the .com
Yeah,
craze,
yep.
and when he was being interviewed, asked him, "Why don't you invest in the tech stock? Why don't you invest in the internet?" And his answer was so perfect. He says, "Because I don't know the rules of the game." He says, "I don't play if I don't know the rules of the game. I'm not going to invest in that. Would be stupidity."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know traditional markets. I know how to read. I know how to gauge leadership and management, and I know how to value and see whether a company is undervalued in this sector in this.
Yeah.
I don't know that industry. I don't know that, so I'm not going to stay in that.
Yeah.
Because
That's very wise. And
he's been the richest man in the world for. And here's the thing: do you know? And I'll end the. Do you know? And this is why I love the accumulation camp too.
Yep.
People don't realize this about Warren Buffett. He didn't start making the vast majority of his wealth until his 60s.
Exponential growth.
Yes, the compound interest.
Yeah.
People don't realize that it takes a long time for the compounding to take an
Wow,
effect.
yeah.
He didn't start seeing the vast majority of his wealth until into his 60s.
Yeah.
And so he's 90 now.
Yeah.
And so you think of it. He started investing when he was 10, right?
Wow.
So and the cool thing about Warren Buffett, he's lived in the same house with his wife since 1958,
Yeah.
Omaha. Right. Even he bought it for like $40,000. It's now worth over $1 million.
Wow,
But
yeah.
but here's the thing. He is like this poster board for the accumulation camp, right? And so that's why I like the accumulation camp because again, and I have friends that time the market. They market their day traders, right?
Yeah.
And again, some of them are successful. I don't. That's not where I'm at. I don't believe that's like gambling.
Yeah.
I'm not a gambler.
Yeah.
As a statistician, I abhor gambling.
Yeah.
Unless it's for fun.
Yeah.
But I'll play history. I'll play the data. I'll look at trends.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And so I'll play the long game.
Yeah.
Right. So, but also I'm smart enough to know that I can analyze a business, and I know that that if I know a good opportunity, if I see an opportunity where I can build a business and start earning cash flow off that,
Yeah.
that's where if you study millionaires and you study billionaires, there's a
Yeah.
great book called "What Would Billionaires Do?"
Yeah.
Then you start to see, like Rockefellers, you learn about the Rockefellers, and you start to realize this is how billionaires and millionaires do it. And again, it's all about cash flow. It's about building passive income through assets. And that's why if you look at portfolios of most millionaires and all billionaires, they have real estate as part of their portfolio. They don't have all their money in stock market. Only 20% of only 20% of the wealth of millionaires that I've seen are in the stock market. Okay. Even Dave Ramsey. Look at Dave Ramsey.
Yeah.
Over 50% of his net worth is in real estate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so he loves real estate.
Yeah.
Too. Now, if you don't like real estate, obviously I wouldn't put money into
Yeah.
real estate. But it's
Yeah. If you
anyway,
don't know the rules too. Yeah.
right, exactly. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's. But
Yeah.
no, it's obviously a topic I enjoy talking about.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
I enjoy sharing information because information's free. And you know what? This was not taught to me. They don't teach it in high schools,
No.
and I figure, well, why not me?
Yeah.
In fact, I do have a thought. I haven't been able to do it, but one of the things that I would like to do if I stay in teaching is is to create a class for incoming freshmen. It'd be a one of those college seminar type classes, teaching them all of these things that I've learned over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Well, 26 years now. And so it's an idea, a project that I want to
Yeah,
do
that's
because
awesome.
I found out that I do have, there is an opportunity where an adjunct like myself could create a class that could get approved at a college level where incoming freshmen could, as an elective,
Yeah.
take it. And because I get a lot of feedback from my students, I get emails from my students every time I go through this stuff with them
Yeah.
that are telling me the same thing. Nobody's ever told me like
Yeah.
this. Thank you so much, Mr. C, for sharing
Yeah.
this information. I mean, I had one student says, I never had a savings account until I took your class. And so because I challenged them.
Yeah.
And because I believe most college students are like me. I'm average. I always think I'm average. And if I think I'm average, probably most people are probably started where I started, not really knowing much about money, unless their parents taught them.
Yeah.
And if they were lucky enough, like one student that's in my class right now, she's awesome. And some of the principles that she had already learned from her grandmother.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah,
like the
that's-
principle of paying yourself first.
Yeah.
And that's the idea of before you pay any bills, you
Yep.
put money aside for retirement.
Some of what you make is yours to keep.
Exactly. And so when I was teaching that, she says, "Yeah, my grandmother always told me that since I was a kid."
Yeah.
And I was like, "You are so lucky."
Yeah.
And so she's been saving her money since, and I, and I don't share, I don't share my finances with anybody other than my kids and my wife and stuff. But I can tell you that here's what I'll share with you, and for your audience. And the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
When I told you when I was 25, from 25 to 28, I purchased my first two properties at 29, and I ended up losing them at 31.
Yeah.
And because when I moved to Chicago, my renters decided not to pay, and so I did not have a good foundation financially to absorb that. But anyway, so that was then.
It sounds like similar to like a Jim Rohn kind of story there.
Yes. And so what happened was 15 years later, so go back to Joy and I getting on the same page. So to go back to the budget. So we started doing a budget. It was August of 2017. We started doing a budget. Since then, it's now 2024. We have unloaded over $500,000 of debt.
Wow.
Yeah. And that is a testament to the fact that I did it once when I was single, just following those principles that I alluded to earlier from the Richest Man in Babylon and now from Dave Ramsey's the 7 Baby Steps.
Yeah.
I owe, and I credit to the 7 Baby Steps 100%, because we needed to be that strict, because we had been so out of control with our spending, because we made good money. I mean, we made well in the 6 figures and still do. But we were broke. I mean, I can honestly say, and I tell my students, I don't divulge how much money we make, but I would tell them, look, we were making 6 figures, and we were struggling financially.
Yeah.
And people hear that and it's like, you're making 6 figures and you're struggling.
Yeah.
And people
It's
don't
a shocker
realize
to some
people don't
people.
realize how little nowadays 6 figures is. But that's another story. But the thing is when I was making $33,000 a year, we were barely struggling.
Yeah.
And then I would always tell myself, when we make 6 figures, when I get my degree and I start working as a statistician and we get to 6 figures, then we'll really start to. And people realize when you get to 6 figures, there's a law of human nature. There's a business law actually too, that it's Parkinson's law. Parkinson's, no, that's a different law. There's I can't remember. But anyway, there's a law that says that if, when people make more money, their spending increases.
Yeah.
People will automatically, unless you are disciplined on a budget, it's a phenomenon that when people make more money, you spend more money.
Yeah.
And it could be, there's a lot of contributing factors. Keeping up with the Joneses,
Yeah.
the idea that you've got to have, again, like what I was saying before, but we had to, as far as with us, with the 7 baby steps, the idea was we had to be on a strict budget because we needed to control our spending.
Yeah.
We had to live lower than our spending
Yeah.
in order to pay off that debt. So we really sacrificed. And the thing is when we did that, we got on the same page and we started following the steps and we started doing that.
Yeah.
We very rarely fought on money. So going back to the same thing
yeah.
so I'm trying to tie it all together
Yeah.
now, is that when we were not on the same page, we fought all the time.
Yeah.
But when we worked through it and Joy realized that we needed to be on a budget, else we were going nowhere fast.
Yeah.
And I knew it. And then she knew it.
Yeah.
And we said, okay, we got to turn this ship around.
Yeah.
And the only way to turn a ship, when you've got a tanker going in one direction, it takes a long time to turn around.
Right.
It doesn't turn around on a dime. So
Yeah.
we knew we had to really
Yep.
go almost to a obscene amount of discipline.
Yeah.
And that changed because when we did that, we were talking and communicating about what we're going to do. We have had very few fights over money. Most of them because of me. To be honest with you,
Yeah.
it's me because and I know that and I accept that. But the thing is life has been so much more peaceful. Here's the thing. Here's the other thing too. Joy used to stay up at night worrying about money. She does not worry about money anymore. And that's a good feeling for me.
That's a beautiful thing.
We went through hell and high water because of financial decisions we made stupid. I mean, I like I like to steal Dave Ramsey's quote when he says, I have a PhD in DUMB because I've done stupid stuff like he has. And the thing is that, she doesn't worry. It's like everything's covered.
Yeah.
And the thing is like we're at a point now that we are very comfortable.
Yeah.
And now, and the thing is I would not have been able to buy the Fox Valley APA if we did not have our shit together with our finances. And so, and to be honest with you, that's why I left the APA those 4 years.
Yeah.
The second time was because I needed to focus on the fight. That's when we decided to go on the budget, and we said no more pool.
Yeah.
Pool is a privilege.
Yeah.
Pool that's not a necessity.
Yeah.
So we wiped out all of the stuff that we didn't need to do, and pool was one of them. So so I
Very
walked away from
strict,
pool.
Yeah.
And I said, if it's not something that we need, then it's gone. And so I sold my pool table.
Wow.
So here, remember now. So here's the thing. So I went back. I remember the first time I ended up going. Say, you know what? I'm not going to be playing pool. I sold our pool table. Wow. I sold stuff. I sold everything I could just to pay off debt.
Yeah.
Because the goal for me and Joy was to get out of debt.
Yeah.
And so after 4 years, we were finally in a position now that when we went back to pool, and the opportunity came to buy the league, money wasn't an issue.
Yeah.
And the feeling to be able to go into a negotiation of buying a business and not having to worry about the money aspect is a feeling that I will never let go. And a thing I never want to go back to the fear and the idea of not wanting. I mean, it changes you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's humbling.
Yeah.
I am very humbled. I'm very thankful, and God has blessed us in so many different ways. And so that's another thing. Being a very devout Catholic has been a instrumental part of who I am, because he has been there, and I'm a strong believer that if you're a good steward with what you have,
Yeah.
you will get more.
Yeah.
If you're not, you'll lose it all.
Yeah.
And I believe that because I've lived it.
Yeah.
When I was not good with money,
Yeah.
it's also good principles.
Yeah.
But the thing is that the more that once we decided that we're going to be good stewards with what we had, and we were going to tithe, and we were going to save, and we were going to do that, things started changing.
Yeah.
And he's always been there. He's always, even when I was out of work for 6 months, I remember that a check came in the mail. I have no idea where it came from. It was like a reimbursement check. And to this day, I don't know why we got it. But we got a reimbursement check that paid our mortgage because we didn't know how we were going to pay the mortgage.
Wow.
We had tens of thousands of dollars saved in our safe when I lost when I was unemployed in between jobs in those 6 months. We went through the money in the safe. We had all our credit cards racked up paying the mortgage.
Yeah.
Because we thought I was going to find a job,
Yeah.
right? We did not think I was going to be out of job. And so there was times where we were praying every day, and we'd be on the ladder. So I'd be paying the house because I didn't know what else to do. I was
Yeah.
putting job applications out. I wasn't getting any
Yep.
nibbles. And again, I had a great resume. And so I'd be paying the house because I was fixing up the house. I
Yeah.
had to keep myself busy,
Yeah.
right? As a man, I was like, I can't sit around.
Yeah.
To my son. So we'd be on the ladder, and so we were doing a novena where every hour we would pray. So she would come out, every hour she'd be like, "Okay, it's an hour. And I'd get down the
Yeah.
ladder. We'd say a prayer because it's like we didn't know what else to do,
Yeah.
but the check came in the mail, and I was like, "Holy cow,
That's amazing."
And then when we got the job, it was. It came at the right time.
Yeah.
I mean, it couldn't have been more perfect.
Yeah.
But so that's also been a big thing with me, is that, you know what, if I need to be a good steward, I don't care how much money I have, and I've been blessed to have mentors come into my life that have been good examples of what it means. I have friends that are millionaires. I have a friend that lives in Texas. He makes $500,000 a month.
Wow.
And gives a lot of it away to charity. I have a friend that owns a business here locally that is a multimillionaire, and he's been also a fellow Catholic, a devout Catholic, who always has been very generous with his time, and has one of the largest shell collections in the nation. He loves shells.
Oh,
Very,
wow.
very smart man.
Yeah.
But he always is quick to say money's not everything.
Yeah.
He says, you know what? It's just money.
Yeah.
And the thing is for a long time when I didn't have money, it's like, good, nice enough for you to say. I get it now.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
everything I've learned from all the books I've read is that all of these people that I look to that are successful started with nothing.
Yeah.
And they all say the same thing. It's like, don't focus on the money. Don't focus on the money.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to do when you don't have money.
Yeah.
But I get it now. I mean, I've gotten it for a long time. It's like when I realized that, you know what, it's focus on the business, focus on serving people, focus on what's important, and eventually the money will come. It may not come tomorrow. It may not come next year. It may not come from 5 years, but eventually, if you believe in what you're doing and you have a good product or you have a good business model, it'll happen.
Yeah.
And so,
That's beautiful. Thank you very much for all that. I actually want to stay on this topic a little bit longer.
Yeah, sure.
There's a lot of good stuff to unpack here, and I feel like, especially in the world today, this needs to be hit a little bit harder, because there's a lot of confusion in this topic, I believe. But and we kind of bounced around it a little bit, but I'm going to give a little bit of a backstory. I grew up with no religion at all. Like my grandfather was like actually strictly against it, and I grew up with no religion. My mom I knew was religious, but like she just she wasn't active. And I was always curious, and I actually have a very powerful memory of when I was very young. I was in grade school. I remember getting on the bus thinking about like what happens after you die, and it was terrifying to me. And I believe I was in third grade. It was a really early memory, and I remember climbing onto the school bus after school. I was about to go home, and I was getting onto the bus, and I remember just breaking down crying as I grabbed the handle and I took my first step onto the bus, and I just started bawling, thinking about, like, I thought it was everything just went black, and I actually thought that up until I met my fiance, and my now fiance, and very devout Catholic as well, and she she has just changed my world, and she got me my first Bible, and I read it every night, and it's just absolutely amazing. Where I want to go with this, though, is the interesting thing with the finances in religion. There's a lot of confusion there, and you hear things tossed around about like money's the root of all evil, and then like and you did kind of answer it
Right.
with being a good steward of what is provided. So I love that topic.
Yep.
And another like quote that's thrown around is it's just that it's easier for a camel to fit through the eye of the needle than a rich person to go to heaven. And one of the things that because I have looked into that, but like specifically, what I understand from that is the eye of the needle is actually the doorway, like the skinny doorway of the gates. So what it's essentially saying is unpacking what you have, taking off the luggage of the camel so it can bend a knee and get through the doorway.
Right. It's so I'm glad you brought that up. But yes, you're accurate in saying that. So two things. The scriptures say that the love of money is the root of all evil, not money itself. What I would say, and there was a lady, I don't know her name, but again, it was on a TikTok video, and she said this, and I thought perfect. Because people will say money's not everything, or what they'll also say is money isn't the most important thing. And I agree with them. And she said, yes, it's not the most important thing, but it helps you get those things that are the most important things. Which is, it helps you with the most important things, right? Like family, generosity, right? It goes back to those things, right?
Yeah.
Where you want to help other people.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that what drives me, like Joy and I will go out, and I'm going to circle back to this, but Joy and I'll go out, and there'll be times where I don't do this a lot. Joy would kill me. But what I'll do is I have been known to I'll be at the checkout, and I will pay for the groceries of the person behind me. Or I will pay for somebody's meal, especially if you're military. If I see a military guy at the restaurant, I will call the waitress over once I find out who her waitress is, and I'll say, look, here's my card. Whatever their bill is, put it on my card.
Wow.
And see, the thing is I wasn't always able to do that. And so, but that's always been something that's been near and dear to my heart, is to help other people, because I know what it's like not to have money.
Yeah.
And so, elderly people is another area where I have a heart for, because there's a lot of elderly people that suffer. So the thing is being a good steward means also helping the less fortunate.
Yeah.
So again, the three things that were expected, especially as Christians, to take care of the widows, the orphans, and the poor. Well, how do you do that? You can pray for them. I'm 100% on board with praying, and I believe prayer works. I believe that prayer changes things. I think prayer changes history, and that could be a whole nother topic. But I also believe that because we live in a physical universe, right? That we should use, it also says in the scriptures, I can't remember if it's Romans, but it's one thing to tell somebody you'll pray for them, but it's another thing to give them a cloak, to give them a place to stay, to provide a meal for them. It's what you do. See, the thing is people forget that they'll know you're my disciples by what you do. In Romans, it says it's the doer of the law that is justified, not the sayer. So the thing is I am well aware that if God, and because God has blessed us and continues to bless us, and I pray every day, and my son is in Rome right now on a pilgrimage, and one of the things that I gave to him as an intention to bring with him is that to ask that God continues to bless us abundantly. And some people might mistakenly say that, well, you're being selfish. Oh my gosh, you're greedy. No, because in my mind, the more God blesses us, the more I'm going to have an opportunity to bless other people through that. Because I believe that as a Christian, you have a responsibility to use those blessings to help other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what it's all about.
Yeah.
So the other thing that you said, in addition to, the idea of money being evil, was also the idea of the rich man, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Being rich is not, everybody thinks, you're rich, you've got it easy. But from a Christian point of view, being rich means you've got all you bear more of the responsibility, and you have more to watch out for, because it's easier for somebody with wealth to fall into the trap of sin, to fall into all of these things that are become now easy, right?
Yeah, you're right.
And again, this is from my perspective, and I believe it's accurate that that's why it's easier for it's easier for the camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, is because you've got all of these distractions.
Yeah.
You've got to fight all of these distractions. That's one of the reasons why do priests take a vow of poverty? Because it can be a distraction. The material world is a distraction.
Yeah.
And so they take their vows of poverty and celibacy, right? Because of the distractions. And so, because what is a priest? A priest is a father figure, and to stay focused on what they're married to the church. Right. So the priest needs to be focused on that. So, and as a layperson, the more wealth you have, it's another thing you got to watch out for. And again, being humility, being humble, and being, prayerful, and and making sure that you're watching out for those pitfalls.
Yeah.
That's about what I can say.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much
you're
for
very
that.
welcome.
That's a very...
Thank you for asking that. I mean, because I appreciate asking that question. Because my Catholic faith, my identity, as far as, I am a Catholic, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm a devout Catholic, and I haven't always been a Catholic, but I am. It's who I am.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that make me who I am. And I don't talk about it. It's not something I go out and talk about, because again, when I'm out with business, it's business.
Right.
I don't jam it down people's throats. But if somebody asks, I'll talk about it. But so yes, I very much appreciate the question.
Thank you. I love getting that out on the platform, especially like you said too, without like jamming it down somebody's throat. Because I've had experiences where it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth too, when I was going through that phase where I didn't know anything, and I felt like I would run across people that I felt like I was being looked down on because I didn't have a religion when I was growing up. So it was a tricky subject for me to find answers and learn about, because I I almost felt embarrassed where like asking such basic questions where you'd think somebody at that age should know by now kind of thing. But it was an interesting way to grow up, and it was a tough subject to introduce myself into, and I can't thank my fiance enough for all the knowledge she's
Well,
provided.
praise God for that. You know, it's God is. It's amazing how he works. It's like we don't see what's going on. It's like there's many moments in my life where it's like when I'm going through it, I have no idea where God is. But then looking back 5 years down the road and looking back is like, now I get it. It's like,
Yeah.
but that's why he's the infinite mind. I have a finite mind.
Yeah.
There's no way, and this is why my dad was an atheist, very irreligious. He would laugh at me and my brothers when we were Christians and things like that, and he would just make fun of us. And he grew up Catholic, but he did not have a good experience.
Okay.
And unfortunately, many people who grew up Catholic, unfortunately, do not have a good experience. And I see a lot of people who have left that do leave the faith, and the biggest reason that I've seen that people leave the Catholic faith is because of they don't understand their faith, and so they're not well catechized.
Okay.
So when I grew up, I didn't grow since you were talking about you. I didn't grow up in a totally religious family either. Like my mom would take us to mass. We didn't know what mass was. She just took us to church, and there was a priest up there, and it was the most boring thing that I've ever been to I mean, the only thing we looked forward was the donuts afterwards. So they had donuts afterwards. So, but my mom would drag us to these churches, and sometimes they were Catholic and sometimes they weren't. And so I wasn't really religious, but I love science. My brothers and I love science.
Yeah.
We loved everything there was about the world and trying to figure out how it works.
Yeah.
And so we fell in love with biology and at a young age, and always wanted to figure out how things operated.
Yeah.
And so we immersed ourselves in science. Science and math were my favorite classes to take. And so all through eighth grade, up through eighth grade, I think my mom, in eighth grade, there was this youth group, and she wanted to take us to this youth group. I can't remember why, but I do remember there was a girl I liked, and she went to this youth group. So I was all in.
Yeah.
And so before that, I knew Jesus. We read the Bible. We watched the things on TV. So I knew Jesus, and I knew about God, and I knew about the scriptures sort of, but it wasn't my thing. It was, I was all into science. And so we started going to the youth group, and but then we started reading the Bible, and I started looking at the Bible from an analytical point of view, like understanding the Bible. So again, learning about Scripture. Once I started going to church, and I started going to this youth group, and they were asking some questions, and so I was okay. Well, let's do Bible studies, right? Study it, right? So again, going back to my personality is like, okay. If I'm going to study something, I might as well just go all in.
Right.
So we started reading books. So my brothers and I we even went to, like my brother James and I, when we were 15, we actually went to a conference at Duquesne University.
Yeah.
So we got into creationism.
Okay.
Right. So because we're science, biology, and we talk about evolution.
Yeah.
So evolution. Now we're talking about creationism, because we got this Bible, and how does it all work? So again, it all kind of came together.
Yeah.
And so, and the more we got into Scripture, the more it made sense to me. So the idea was just learning more about it, and discussing with people, and just taking that deeper dive.
Yeah.
And of course, having arguments with people too.
Yeah.
And so that was always fun.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was heated. But that's how that's how I got introduced into being a Christian. In fact, I gave my life to Christ when I was in eighth grade. Didn't get baptized until I was in high school, but yeah, I was a Bible-believing Christian since 1988, and then became Catholic in 2003. That was another story. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
because as a Christian, when I became Christian, I was anti-Catholic.
Okay.
I thought all Catholics were going to hell. Oh, wow. For years.
Yeah.
I thought because I would get in arguments with Catholics, and you don't even know your faith.
Yeah.
And the thing is, as I got older, I actually got less antagonistic towards
Okay,
Catholics.
yeah.
I kind of looked at Catholics as poor Catholics.
Uh-huh,
They
yeah.
go through all this motions. They go these things and
Yeah.
all these rituals and stuff, and they really don't understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I kind of had more pity on them.
Yep.
And until my brother became Catholic, and that was a shocker to me.
Yeah.
Because I would never think that any of my brothers would, because years we were no Catholics. You read in Revelation. Now again, I don't know how much of the scriptures you've learned, but in Revelation it talks about the whore of Babylon, and we
Yep.
looked at the Catholic Church as the whore of Babylon. So you got to understand, we were educated in scriptures, and we had discipleship teachers and stuff like that. But everything was from the point of view of a Protestant.
Yeah.
And so all of the books and everything we were exposed to were anti-Catholic, Chick
Okay.
publications and all these
Yeah.
books. And for whatever reason, never even thought about looking at it from a Catholic point of view, because all the arguments from a Catholic were other Catholics that really didn't know their faith,
Yep.
didn't know how to explain their faith to me. So the way they explained it, this is like we were like shooting ducks in a barrel. It's
Yeah,
like, it just didn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then the day that in 1999, when my brother gave me a call, I'll never forget it. It was February.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked to each other, every now and then. He called me and he said, this was my brother James. And he said, hey, Mark, we were chit-chatting. And after a little bit, he says, hey, what are you doing in April? I'm like, nothing. He says, well, I want you to fly out for my confirmation. And a cold chill went up my spine, because immediately I went to the Catholic Church. I'm like,
Yeah.
I said, James, I said, Jamie, I call him
Yeah.
Jamie. So I said, Jamie, are you becoming Catholic? And he said, yeah. And literally, I froze, because I swore he's again,
Yeah.
he's going to hell. And so immediately we were on the phone with our Bibles out for hours,
Yeah.
for at least 3 hours, and we were going back and forth. And he started asking me questions that I had never been asked before. And there were two questions at the end that I didn't have an answer for. And
Yeah.
the question was, and he set me up so perfectly.
Yeah.
He said, Mark, when you open the Bible, and I knew he was setting me up, but I just didn't know how. And he said, when you open the Bible, do you just read and you just completely understand what you're reading? And I paused, because I didn't want to answer.
Yeah.
And because I knew I was walking into something, and he knew I was pausing, and I'm like, I don't know how to answer this question. He says, well, Mark, and then he chimes in. He says, Mark, remember Glenn Peterson? And he was my discipleship teacher at one point in high school. And he said, yeah, you had a discipleship teacher, right? And he says, why did you have a discipleship teacher? And then I started dawning. He says, well, because to teach me how to interpret scripture. He says, yes. He says, because none of us come to scripture as a blank slate, and we just read it.
Right.
And we just understand everything like it was.
Yep.
We have people in authority that we've entrusted to help explain what these scriptures mean, right? And he says, and here's the question, which authority are you going to listen to? He says, there's all kinds of authorities. He says, you have John MacArthur, Charles Stanley, you've got the Pope, you've got Joseph Smith, you've got the Watchtower for the Jehovah's Witnesses. You've got all of these people and entities that all say they're the authority on Scripture.
Yeah.
And they all disagree with each other.
Yeah.
They all can't be right. I'm like, okay. That was one.
Yeah.
The other one was, the other thing was, where does the Bible come from?
Yeah.
Where did we get the Bible? Who put the Bible together?
Yeah.
And I didn't know, because I didn't know
Yeah.
church history for me. Just so you know, as a Protestant, most Protestants don't care about church history because it's not an essential thing about the
Okay.
faith, right? It's
Yeah.
about the scriptures. It's about what the scriptures and studying scriptures.
Right.
But when you start talking about history, you start realizing, well, when you ask the question, where does the Bible?
Yeah.
We don't even think about it. It's like, where did
Yeah.
the Bible come from?
Yeah. What kind of question is
Well,
that?
the God, of course, is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but who put the Bible together? And
Yeah.
and it wasn't until then I was like, he said, well, the Catholic Church is the one that put the Bible that we have together. He says it took over 300 years and 2 councils of the Catholic Church. Before then, there was no Bible. It wasn't until the Catholic Church came back and said, we are saying these books. And literally, there are 300 manuscripts of what they called scripture that was floating around out there in different circulations. But it wasn't until the Council of Trent when the Catholic Church said, okay, we've gone through all these, and out of these 300 different manuscripts and documents that are out there, these are what we're going to say is scripture. And they had a whole process of how we're going to determine whether something's scripture, like a checklist.
Yeah.
And so that was another thing. And there was another question too, I can't remember. But see, what I did was, after I hung up the phone, I still wasn't convinced.
Yeah.
My goal was I was going to save my brother from making the biggest mistake of his life.
Yeah.
And so I spent the next months, from February till April, the next month, and then even afterwards, I flew out there and I spent. It was very awkward because I was learning, and I was still, even though I went to his confirmation, I started meeting his Catholic friends, and they were talking to me, and some of the things they would say, "Oh, how are you? So when are you going to become Catholic?" That was the one. So when are you going to become Catholic? Your brother? I'm like, oh boy, and so it was, but they were really nice. So it was interesting because it exposed to me some things that I never was exposed to as far as Catholics. Like, it was around Easter, so I got to see how Easter is celebrated, and it was really, the one thing I could say about Catholics at the time that I walked away was they are very reverent about Easter and the whole Passion, which I didn't even know what Passion, when they were talking about the Passion of the Christ, and I was like, Passion. I was like, what is this? I was completely ignorant.
Yeah.
And I look back now and I laugh because it was like, but I went home and I went to my pastor. And so what happened was I put on my cap because, again, as an analytical thinker, and I couldn't answer the questions. He put forth some very good arguments that I didn't have an answer for. So what I went to my pastor. And so I played the devil's advocate. So I basically hit him with the same questions and the same things that my brother said to me, hoping that he was going to give me an answer, right? Something to go back to my brother and to answer his question to help save him, right?
Yeah.
But what I found was my pastor, who also was anti-Catholic, who came from the Catholic Church, I'm thinking, he's perfect.
Yeah.
He'll be able to give me some ammo.
Yeah.
After meeting with him and talking with him, going through, literally like an hour or two afterwards, and I was, again, playing the devil's advocate, I left wanting because I left like he did not answer the questions I had any better than the answers I came up with, which was very troubling to me.
Yeah.
So then there was another opportunity. There was a seminary student
Okay.
that had left to go to seminary. And he was going to become a pastor. He went to one of the best, Gordon Conwell Seminary in Texas. And so I'm like, okay, he's a third year.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. And I Jeremy, Jeremy's brother. And I don't remember his name, but all I remember is like I reached out to him and said, look, can we have lunch?
Yeah.
I said, my brother's becoming Catholic and I need to talk to you and I want to, So we had a 4-hour lunch.
Wow.
Same thing happened. We spent there and at the end of lunch, I left and I went to my car and I felt like I was no closer to an answer than when I left.
Yeah.
But my brother, here's the other thing. My brother gave me 2 books. He said, look, Mark, I need you to promise me something. I said, I'll answer any questions you have. We can continue this, but I want you to do me a favor. He says, look, you've never read anything written by a Catholic. None of us have ever read anything from a Catholic point of view. We've always read things from a Protestant point of view. I said, I want to challenge you to read a couple of books. They're written by Catholics on the Catholic faith. I says, do that. And of course, being an intellectual, and being intellectually honest with myself. Mm-hmm. That's one thing one of the things I've guided my life in all things is following the evidence wherever it might lead. Okay. In science, that's what you do.
Yeah.
In science, the scientific method is you go wherever the science leads you, wherever the data leads you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you agree with it. You have to be able to put all your biases aside and follow the evidence. And so I made a conscious decision a long time ago that I was going to follow the evidence regardless of where it led me.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those things. Is okay,
Yeah.
James or Jamie, I'll read the books. And so I had to pray, and when I was going to start reading these books, I had to pray that God would allow me to read these books
Yeah.
without any kind of bias, because one, I wanted to find error, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to read these, but it's from a Catholic point of view,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously from a debating point of view and from an argument point of view, it's always good to know your adversary. It's
Yeah.
always good to know where your opponent's coming from,
Yep.
which was kind of ironic because I never did that with Catholics. I never, because I knew it all.
Yeah, right.
I was we were very arrogant. I was very arrogant because as a Protestant, I already had dismissed Catholics.
Sure,
And so
yeah.
there was no reason.
Yeah.
Because they were completely wrong. I mean, you believe that little cookie on the altar is Jesus?
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
would laugh at
Yeah.
it. It's like, who would ever believe that? It's like, but then so the book that I read was The Faith Explained by Leo Tress. It's the Baltimore Catechism. He basically writes the Baltimore Catechism, which for those of you who are not Catholic, the Baltimore Catechism is literally a question and answer form where it basically answers all of the questions that Catholics believe, like who God is, what is our purpose as man, and it goes through every single teaching of the Catholic Church.
I'm gonna have
everything.
to read these books.
Yeah.
too.
So Leo Tress. So it's in a prose. So it's a very easy to understand, and he does a great job at basically going through the Baltimore Catechism
Okay.
in prose. So I started reading through that book. And the other book he recommended was a book called Rome Sweet Home by Dr. Hahn.
Okay.
Scott Hahn, who was an anti-Catholic, who became Protestant. He is now one of the foremost scholars in Catholicism. And he was one of the foremost up-and-coming scholars in Protestantism. And it was his studies of Scripture that actually brought him to the Catholic Church. He came to the Catholic Church as an anti-Catholic, but it was funny because, and I'm not going to get too much into it, but basically he was studying Scripture from a purely scriptural point of view, from a scholarly point of view,
Yeah.
and in his diving into church history. He started learning church history, and through his study of church history and the Scriptures, he started coming up with what he thought were novel ideas.
Okay.
And what happened was, as he's coming up with these novel ideas, he didn't realize that these novel ideas he was coming up with were things that the Catholic Church had already taught for hundreds of years, for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And so Rome Sweet Home was his story of how he became Catholic.
Okay.
So because it was anti-Catholic, and so obviously that's why my brother wanted me to read
Yeah.
it. So I'm reading through these books, and this is over, I want to say at least a 3-year period.
Okay.
I read the books. Obviously, I'm going through these books. It took me less than a year, obviously, to read the books. But as I'm going through these books, I realized that, one, I didn't know the Catholic faith. I did not know the Catholic faith because, and the second thing was, I started realizing that from a Catholic point of view, a lot of the things that I struggled with as a Protestant, because as a Protestant, there were lots of things that we would argue with other Protestants. There's all these different Protestant churches out there, and they all disagree. Baptists, non-denominationals, evangelicals, you've got Lutheran, you've got all these Protestant churches that all disagree with each other on what the essentials of the Scriptures.
Yeah.
So I would have arguments. So there were things in the Scriptures that I was not sure of.
Yeah.
And so there, salvation, and so there were lots of things I struggled with in my faith. But when I was reading from the Catholic point of view, there were lots of things that made more sense from a Catholic point of view than it did from a Protestant point of view.
Yeah.
And this kept happening over and over again. And then what happened was I would take these arguments and I would have my friends for their friends. I would kind of like throw them at them, right?
Yeah.
See how they would handle
Yeah.
it. And time again, they didn't have a better answer. And so like things that I struggled with from Catholics, so I'll just throw a couple, like Mary,
Yep.
purgatory, praying to the saints, all of the Eucharist, a big one, the Eucharist, right? The Eucharist, the fact that wafer on the altar is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ, right? That's a big one
Yeah.
for Protestant, for
Yeah.
me. So all of these things, from a Protestant point of view, from Scripture, all started making sense from a Catholic point of view.
Yeah.
And in fact, it made a lot of sense. In fact, this is why it goes 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I started reading other books. And so
Yeah.
now I started diving further into other Catholic scholars on all of the Catholic teachings. So one by one, the dominoes started falling. The, understanding purgatory,
Yeah.
from once you go in, and it all goes back to Judaism. So once I started going into the Jewish faith, now I started diving into Jewish scholars and so, and all from Dr. Hahn and whatnot. And so what I started realizing, all these dominoes started falling. No longer had an issue with purgatory, understood where it came from in purgatory, understood where it comes from in Hebrew, because Hebrews, Jews believe in purgatory, or not purgatory, well, they call it a different name. It's called Sheol.
Okay.
But anyway, not to go down the rabbit hole, but all of these dominoes like purgatory and salvation and where the scriptures came from, and Mary was a big one. I had a big problem with Mary. Because it's like, the scriptures say, pray to God alone, right? The only one mediator kind of thing, right? But then I started realizing, if you go into the background of the Old Testament and you start realizing, like, for example, in history, you start talking about the Davidic kingdom, and you start realizing that, oh my gosh, wait, if you look at the Davidic kingdom, where God created this earthly kingdom to represent his heavenly kingdom, and what did he have? Well, who was the most powerful woman in the Davidic kingdom? It was, well, if you look at David, who was the one that counseled David? It was his mother, Bathsheba.
Okay. Wow.
Okay. And so who's Bathsheba? Well, she sat at the right hand of the king, the queen mother. So there's the idea of the queen mother.
Yeah.
Well, if you read the scriptures and you start getting into the Greek and start getting into the whole idea of the Davidic kingdom that lasted 400 years, there was this idea of the queen mother. Well, then you go to the New Testament, where Jesus comes in, and Jesus is establishing a heavenly kingdom. Well, what's he going to model it after? Well, what the Old Testament had. And so what does Jesus do? He starts what? Getting the 12. He starts getting the 72, and he starts setting up his kingdom. Well, who is going to be the figure of what's going to be the queen mother of what they call the Gebirah in Judaism is the queen mother. Well, who's the queen mother of this heavenly kingdom? Well, oh my gosh, it dawned on me it's going to be Mary.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. So Mary plays a part. Why does Mary have such an important role?
Yeah.
Is because, well, you look at who his, Jesus' mother is.
Yeah.
And so that's why Catholic is now, it dawned on me from a Catholic point of view, why does Mary have such a prominent role? Because she is venerated as the queen mother of heaven. And so, not that she's better or she's like a god.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
because that's another thing that I used to believe. Oh,
Yep.
they worship Mary.
Yeah.
No, Catholic. And that's what I would tell. I would accuse Catholics of worshiping Mary. Now I realize, from a Catholic point of view, no, veneration is not worship. Worship is for God alone. Veneration is that we hold the saints, especially Mary, at a high regard, a high respect.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
and again, here's the other thing. And I'll end it with this. It's like, okay, from a humanly point of view,
Yeah.
if somebody talked bad about my mom,
Yeah.
that probably wouldn't make me happy, right?
Yeah.
But if somebody respects my mom, I automatically have respect for them, right?
Yeah.
So respecting somebody's mom, we all know in the human realm here,
Yeah.
respecting somebody's mom,
Yeah.
especially if you're Italian, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Respecting somebody's mom is a big deal,
Yep.
right? Showing respect to one's mom
Yep.
is a way of honoring and respecting that person.
Yeah.
Well, Jesus had a mom. Here's the thing that Protestants like myself would forget.
Yeah.
We forget that Mary was just not the mother of Jesus. She was not just mother of Mary, the Jesus, the human person. She was Mary, mother of the Jesus, the divine. And we like to separate that as Protestants, but the bottom line is you're not just mother of one, you're mother of both.
Wow.
And so once you realize that, look, respecting the mother of God is showing respect for the one that created her,
Yeah.
who is God.
Yeah.
And so, but that's,
Wow.
but again, see, it took me,
Yeah.
so at the end, after about 3 years of studying, as all of these things I was starting to come as this makes sense, I believe this, and it got to a point that after almost 4 years, it got to the point where I had to make a decision, because again,
Yeah.
the evidence was becoming so overwhelming
Yep.
that for me to stay Protestant would be willful, what I call willful ignorance.
Yeah.
I would basically be closing my eyes
Yep.
to all the evidence and just ignoring what I said I would never do,
Yeah.
which was what I would always do actually, was always follow the evidence.
Yeah.
And so it got to the point where I still had questions, but it got to the point where I had so many answers that I found that I basically said to myself, look, I'm probably going to find the answers to the rest of them. And I did.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Ever since I became Catholic, and it's been, 2003, it's been over 20 years that I've been a Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And ever since I became Catholic, all of the doubts, all of the things I struggled with as a Protestant went away. I have absolutely no doubt about my faith as a Catholic. And that is a liberating thing.
Wow. Yeah.
And so again, it's not something I talk about all the time, because again, I don't put myself out there.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
But it is a very important thing. I
Absolutely.
appreciate you giving me the platform, because it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I apologize if I talk too much.
No,
because,
please. It's absolutely fascinating. And you have so much insight, and you're so knowledgeable about
only
something.
because of the books I spent a lot. I spent years reading books. I again, going back to what I said towards the beginning, is like if you want to learn something, you got to study it.
Yeah.
And so it goes with anything.
Yeah.
Pool, or whether it's business, or whether it's faith. I've always taken it very important that if you're going to do something, if you want to know something, you got to study it.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Well, you're making the world a better place for sure. This is,
I try.
yeah,
I try.
This is so, it was an honor to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me, because this has been a blast. This is my first time ever doing something like this, and this has been a blast. So thank you for allowing me to come on.
Of course. If you're willing, I'd love to have you back on again.
Yeah, and also if you wanted, I know Joy and I would probably love to, if you come, maybe have both of us on.
That would be awesome.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would be honored. That would be amazing. This was so, I still have so many more questions I want to ask you, but we're running a long time here.
And Joy's probably wondering where I'm at too. So
another episode.
I would love to do another episode.
That would be awesome.
And
Thank
if you
you.
wanted to pick a topic and let me know, and I'd be more than happy to prepare. And
Sure. That sounds great. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. And listeners, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Thanks for all your love and support. I really appreciate it. It means so much. If you like what we're doing here, just like, follow, share, leave a review. That would be awesome. And the best way to make this podcast grow is telling somebody, sharing it. So please continue to support the podcast. I love it. I love hearing from you guys. I love when you guys reach out to me. It means so much. And this is a very powerful episode, and it was so cool. It was an honor to have you on, Mark. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.